Judy, please call the roll.
Regent Bradley. Here. Regent Burmaster. Here. Regent Conley-Kiesler. Regent Crane. Regent Keene. Here. Regent Davis. Here. Regent Falbo. Here. Regent Loftus. Regent McPike. Here. Regent Pruitt. Here. Regent Rosenzweig. Regent Salas. Regent Seminis. Regent Shields. Regent Smith. Here. Regent Spector. Regent Walsh.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Good morning. The minutes of the March 8th and 9th, 2007 meetings have been distributed. Are there any additions or corrections? We have a motion for approval. Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. I have a very quick report. Actually, I'm just happy to be here today. So, but in the last month, a number of the regents and the officers have spent time at the Capitol visiting with the legislative leadership. Kevin Riley and I spoke with Representative Souter, which was took a long time to get that appointment, but it was a very good meeting because we put some things on the table, and he's an outspoken critic of the University of Wisconsin system, and he's candid about it and feels strongly that that in his district where only is it 10% of?
Yeah, a little over 10.
10% of the people are college educated, that he has different priorities, and we appreciated his candor on that. He also felt strongly that a lot of money is being spent for buildings, and likewise that there just isn't enough money for higher education. The good news there is we had a constructive discussion. This was the result of the reason we were able to get the meeting so quickly after once finally asking for it again, was that we had appeared before Joint Finance, and a number of legislators called me and talked to me either at meetings or on the telephone and told me that it was the best presentation they've ever seen the university make. And it was primarily because the university, we moved forward and said, here's our growth agenda, here's what it's going to do, and yes, we've made some mistakes, and here's what we did about them, and they very much appreciated it. It was it was the best Joint Finance Committee meeting that I've ever seen in the last 5 years. And then finally, Kevin Riley and I met with Senator Jim Sullivan, a freshman senator from the Waukesha area. Or not Waukesha, that's your area. He beat Tom Reynolds. Wauwatosa, I'm sorry, Peggy. He's very much a supporter of the University of Wisconsin system, needs to have a better understanding of a lot of the issues, and has asked for information, and will, I think, be a very good advocate as soon as we convince him that he should advocate for us. But overall, it was a month of good meetings at the legislature and a good appearance before Joint Finance, and I think we're on our way towards a much better budget because of all that. Moving on, report of the March 27th, 28th, 2007 meetings of the Wisconsin Technical College System Board. The written report has been provided. Are there any questions or comments? The board's representatives are Regents Keene, Smith, Rosenzweig, and Burmaster. The report of the April 11, 2007 meeting of the Hospital Authority Board has been provided. Are there any questions or comments? The board's representatives are Regents McPike, Rosenzweig, and Smith. At this time, I'd ask Kevin Riley to give his report.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Regent Walsh. And I'll try to make my remarks quick so that we have time for the flood drill when the alarm goes off. Several of us were talking, Chancellor Wells, and we thought, let's see, a number of us had to drive through ice and sleet and snow to get here, and then we had the tornado drill for lunch, and then we had the fire alarm last night, so we're waiting for the, this was, I think, Chancellor Shepard and Provost Butz's idea, we're waiting for the locusts in the River of Blood today to occur. But I do appreciate that you are the safest campus in the system. You do these drills 3 or 4 times a day, 5 days a week, and everybody knows what to do in an emergency. But we're very pleased to turn it over to Rick again to do a presentation with some colleagues on the New North effort that he's been involved in here. We heard about New Era and some of its accomplishments yesterday, and we'll hear about New North today. So, Chancellor Wells, take it away.
Thank you, President Riley. Before I start, I know a little later we're likely to get a resolution thanking the university for hosting the Regents meeting, but I did want to give you all this opportunity because I have a request from all of our staff who've worked so hard to get ready for this meeting, from the sound to the food service to everything you can think of. And what I'd like you to do in recognition of all the good work they've done to support us all here is to contribute to the Pride, Promise, Purpose capital campaign that UW-Oshkosh has just launched, our first comprehensive capital campaign. And we had these in front of you yesterday. And just so make it easy for you, go through, it's wonderfully articulated, built around our students and so on. And in the back, there are some little fact things. And there's a little pledge card in there, too. So if you really want to show your appreciation to this wonderful institution, give. But in all seriousness, I do want to have this opportunity to recognize and thank our individual board members for the tremendous job they do. This is, I know, a very rewarding board to serve on. This is a $4 billion operation, and there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability, 160,000 students and millions of alums, come out of this outstanding institution. And you guys and gals just do a great job for us, and thank you. Okay, just a quick thing. The theme for our meeting has been collaboration and action, building a regional model. And, a lot of times when we think about this and we say, how do we know we're really getting to where we need to be with the notion of collaboration? And I have a simple standard, and that is when you're truly, truly celebrating the success of your competitors, then you've reached the point we need to be to move our state and our region forward. And you're going to hear today a presentation on the New North, and I'm going to turn that over immediately to Jerry Murphy, who will give the presentation. To his left is Kathy Seifert, who is the owner and president of Pinnacle Perspectives. Bob DeCook, who is the president and COO of Bolt Company. And Jerry we mentioned Larry Wires, who's the president and CEO of Wisconsin Public Service. Take it away, Jerry.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Wells. On behalf of everyone up here in the front or in the back, depending on your perspective, we want to thank you very much for not only inviting us to do this presentation today, but also for the fantastic co-branding that has been done throughout the 2-day event with the Regents. Welcome to New North. In front of you, just to get started, is a big layout. Looks like this. That basically is a working document that the board of directors and myself are using as sort of a guiding tool to organize the real work of the organization, not necessarily the structure of the organization. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it should at some point be something that you take a quick look at. It does give you the sense that the organization of the organization is pretty well on its way. The other thing that I did want to basically read off of this sheet is the mission statement. New North's mission is to harness and promote the region's resources, talents, and creativity for the purpose of sustaining and growing our regional economy. This will be accomplished with broad-based collaboration, effective regional and external marketing, and a focus on capital investment and quality jobs. That's a mouthful, and to get to do that, it really absolutely has to be hinged on a couple of things. Just moving forward. That little animation is intended to give you some sense of the fact that this has taken an enormous amount of velocity as well as energy and resources to pull together. The map in the background and the silhouette back there is 18 counties. 18 counties is a lot of real estate to manage to any single purpose. What's really interesting and phenomenal about this particular regional effort is the fact that there are really three pieces behind the success that we've realized so far, and I'll run through each of those. The first is that this document is the Northeast Wisconsin Economic Opportunity Study. It was published in October of 2004. You can see even the beginning hints of the type of collaboration that were required in order for that many counties to come to one single purpose. This was actually underwritten by the two regional workforce development boards. Some of the work behind the research of this, basically the SWOT analysis, was UW Extension, the regional planning commissions, and then a private consultant. So even the effort around trying to set some baseline data around who and what we are and what our opportunities and challenges are was actually, that too was a demonstration of a collaborative initiative. So that's one point that I wanted to raise, is that a lot of what you're going to see in this quick presentation is founded on a lot of hard work that was done to tee it up. So there isn't really, this is not a pillar-to-post type of run to one opportunity or run away from one crisis. There's real foundation behind the organization and its work. The second key to this foundation is the fact that there are and were substantial collaborations that existed in northeastern Wisconsin prior to the invention of New North. I'm going to highlight New Era. I know that you heard a presentation from the leadership of New Era yesterday, but this is, and this is not just because of the audience today, but this is absolutely a critical component of not only the success of New North in its origin, but also in terms of a lot of the work that we are about to embark on as a region toward one purpose, and that purpose being to create economic development in northeastern Wisconsin. The last piece that I want to make sure that I reference is that this collage of investors, people who are putting money behind the organization, if you just take a second to look at that, it's kind of the who's who of northeastern Wisconsin. This is very definitely a vested initiative. There's substantial private sector involvement. There's substantial public sector involvement. Virtually all of the collaboratives that were shown on the prior slide are represented not only in terms of their representation on the board of New North, but also in terms of their willingness to put some resources up. I'm going to highlight a couple of those and draw some attention to the work that the University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh is doing with New North. It's a very significant first step in basically our capacity building was to develop a research foundation that described who and what New North is. Chancellor Wells' Geography Department has been a significant support to our ability to be able to not only identify resources and infrastructure attributes of northeastern Wisconsin, but they also are an incredible marketing advantage to me because they can draw a picture of it. So they've been a phenomenal support system. The MBA program here is chasing after some of the markets that we're looking at that have affinity or attributes that fit to northeastern Wisconsin. So we are tapping the academic resources that comprise New Era. But the private sector piece of this is a critical third element. The real quick lesson, I guess, here is that this organization actually began in a conversation, I guess, back in 2004. That conversation was fortified by the collaboratives that I pointed out a minute ago and the private industry leaders that came to the table with kind of a common sense of trying to collaborate, pull all of the pieces together. That was their focal point, was to try to assemble all of the resources in the region to one purpose. So that basis was there. The second piece is the opportunity study that I identified, and it serves still as the backstop for correcting our course and actually guiding us to the points that I'm about to raise. The branding effort was basically to invent really an organization and a place called New North. It was identified as the first thing out of the box that had to be acquired or accomplished given the recommendations for the opportunity study. Design and building the organization that ultimately came to be known as New North was another one of the recommendations out of that study. Organizing task groups around 6 initiatives that were recommended as starting points were also born of that economic opportunity study. The staffing facilities, all of the sort of the mechanical stuff that falls out of the organization of New North, Inc., all of those things were accomplished, frankly, in this last year. Hence the animation for the Indy track. This is a lot to accomplish in a very short period of time. Last is about where we are right now. Each of the task groups, and there are 6 of them, I'll talk about them in a minute, but each of those now are at a point where they have very defined work programs. They have actionable items that they are now moving forward. So a lot of what conceptually was set as a foundation in the beginning, we couldn't get to defined work without doing that hard work. So this is a critical and a very fast-paced but a very effective conclusion to get to the point where we're moving on action items. As I said, the economic opportunity study actually generated 98 separate recommended action items. Most people can't remember 2 things, so 98 things was far beyond the capacity of our organizational skills. Each one of the resulting 6 reformulations of those 98 recommendations is guided by a task group structure, so there's a chair, there's a working group, and they have specific activities and measurables that go beyond that. Based on this, the initiatives break down like this. 50% of the initiatives are oriented to talent development. 30% is based on business development of both resident and attracting new business investment. And 20% is actually marketing and branding the region, the organization, as New North. I'm going to run through the strategies very quickly, and hopefully the outline that you have on the big sheet will give you a little bit more sense of what they are. But the first three strategies captured under that talent category are basically to attract, retain, and develop talent. There's a diversity initiative and the educational advancement initiative. Collectively, the statement below the educational advancement is the goal. Now, I'm going to go into the educational advancement piece because I thought that would be of a little bit more interest to you than the others. But these are slides that I basically lifted off of our December summit. And I'm going to go through them quickly, but I want to give you the sense of just how much energy is going into this initiative. This is their objective. It was basically the goal was lifted out of the opportunity study going forward. Whoops. Let me get back. Here comes my hand-eye coordination. Thanks. Thank you. Technology. This is a listing of the strata for the educational initiative runs from pre-K all the way through post-secondary and actually even beyond that in terms of workforce retraining, reinvestment in incumbent workers. So it's really the whole strata. You can read through those things as the identified characteristics that they wanted to integrate into the curriculum. The Manufacturing Alliance is sort of a unique organization that grew out of this initiative. And basically, it's 53 or so companies that are now trying to position manufacturing as a positive and attractive career path for students. As you can see, their orientation is they realize they need to go back to the K-12 system as a starting point. They've also gone to the other end of the strata, and that is in terms of trying to match up current demand against labor markets that are in the North. These are a couple of the accomplishments, the 1+3, 1+1. business management associate degree between privates and technical colleges, Fox Valley and their baccalaureate degree in fire response, the alternative teacher licensing program. A common library card may not seem like a big deal, but frankly, it's a very cool deal. It's a great demonstration that people on the street can get their arms around, whether they're students or not. That's a recognized value in the global MBA program. So a couple of things looking forward is a focus on eliminating an achievement gap, or at least starting at pre-K to grade 3 level. A financial focus on access to financial capacity to do post-secondary work. And as you know, there's both metro and rural characteristics of New North. This simply recognizes that they are not a homogeneous sort of approach. These are some initiatives going forward. I know that you've talked about the applied baccalaureate degree. Hopefully that's moving along real strong. We think that that's a fantastic add to the career paths for a lot of students that are in the system today. The manufacturing engineering program highlights the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be a New North campus that provides the capacity to compete. This is a great demonstration of using multiple campuses in their specialties. The customized courses and engineering internships, I talked about a little bit before. The next two strategies fall under business development. The targeting and clustering is a typical format for a development organization around attraction needs, bringing new companies in around attributes that we can position as attractive. And the second big component of that is the retention component, and that's basically serving the needs of resident industry, business and industry. A small business and entrepreneurship has these three categories underneath their objectives. The principal one that might be of interest to this audience is the innovation support. Connecting university intellectual property or capacity to commercialize that around small business or large businesses for that matter is a key component that this group is looking at. The branding initiative is the last of the 6 initiatives, and basically this is to leverage this brand, this new place, made up of many familiar places. There's all that provincial sort of reflex reaction that we need to get beyond, and frankly, it's moving okay. This is, in other places I've been, this has been a difficult thing, but this has actually been a hallmark sort of characteristic of northeastern Wisconsin. The change for that branding is actually to identify New North as a brand within the region and outside. I ran out of alliteration on this. I don't know, I couldn't come up with one more C, that's why that slide stopped there. But all of those things are essential. All those things are characteristics that are essential. Just as a demonstration, these are some statistics, characteristics of New North. Roughly 11,000 square miles, 1.2 workforce at that number. Unemployment, if you took the unemployment at 20 higher ed institutions producing that many degrees, certificates, or advanced placements, that 10,000 plus the unemployment gives you a labor force available of roughly 40,000 people. That's an important number. If you just took one county, and I just took Winnebago as one sample, obviously all of those characteristics add into the regional component. So it's important for people at a county level to understand that they're an important component of the total. But it's also important for them to realize that if you took that same exercise, the number of people, the unemployment, and the graduates, is roughly 7,500 people available for work statistically today. Now, just to give you some sense of what that means, is if an employer came to town wanting to hire 200 people, and their applicant to hire ratio was 30 to 1, nearly all of those people, all available people, would have to be able to fit into whatever those job requirements are. And that's not likely. So Winnebago will begin to realize very quickly that they are in fact part of a region where commuting patterns will make their numbers significantly higher, and their appeal to that particular employer will grow. So the attributes for any one county multiplied at a regional level is significantly more valuable. It's a stronger selling proposition. This is a real quick couple of maps just to give you an idea how the regional overlays work. These are 2 workforce development boards. The screens are the regional planning commissions. That's the chamber coalition up the Highway 41 corridor. Those are the other chambers, and that's not all of them. There's a bunch more dots than that. New Era is basically the main campuses. I didn't put all of the satellite campuses. The last is, or the second last is New Rep, which is a representation of where the economic development community resides throughout. The last slide is the New North investors and volunteers. Now, the point of throwing all of that information on a series of maps was not to impress you with the fact that there's a lot of resources, although that is in fact the case. The important thing is to realize that the point of this organization and the work that we're doing is to connect the dots, amplify the existing networks, create new ones, all of that stuff around 6 directed initiatives. I'm going to leave you with the opportunity to bombard my peers on the board here with questions. I apologize for going fast, but I wanted to simply lay the groundwork for some dialogue, questions that you may have about New North or about how we're working, how we're doing. So the floor is open.
My question reflects my living in Milwaukee and is really not much of a Regent question, but I'll take the opportunity. Have you had any contact with the Milwaukee 7 group? Have you had any discussions where they have benefited from the work you've done and their efforts to try to do something similar?
Yeah, in fact, we have and have plans for continuing discussions there, as well as with the group in southwestern Wisconsin and a group that's forming in the northwestern part of the state. The governor is very interested in this regionalization, as you all probably know and have heard. And the Commerce Department is getting behind the regionalization effort as well. When we did the benchmarking back 3 and 4 years ago, Kathy led that effort. We found this question of economic development around the country was most successful when towns and communities and counties got together and regionalized, because of the point Jerry was making. The asset base is much bigger, and the ability to compete with companies who are looking at assets from other areas in the country is much more impressive when you can collect the counties and communities together. So, for example, in North Carolina, you all know about the Charlotte story. I think you probably do, and it's been very successful. When we talked to the people in that region in this benchmarking exercise, they said that that Charlotte Regional Partnership had started some 15+ years ago. And they spent 5 years getting that region right. And then the state started to realize that regionalization in the state was important. So the next 5 years was the attempt to get regions in the state. And the model that they talked about was that the regional leaders, members of the boards of each of those regional efforts in North Carolina, had members that sat on the Commerce Department board with the governor heavily involved. And the model now is that 4 or 5 regions, I think, operate. And the first thing they want to do is get business into the state. So the regions collaborate to get business into the state. Once it's in the state, the regions then collaborate to pass it around to see where that business should be located to benefit the business the most. So that's, we saw their benchmarks like that, and that's the model that I think the state is trying to work for, and the governor has asked, a number of people from other parts of the state to come here to talk to us as well, to learn from us. And so if we can create this kind of a model, I think it will be pretty darn competitive in terms of attraction of companies and retention of companies. And that regional model in the state is beginning to happen. As a matter of fact, I think in the month of May, is it the middle of May, there are a group meeting with the Commerce Department leadership from all of these regions to collaborate and work together. So that process is starting.
Thank you very much, and I want to commend you for the outstanding work on regional economic development. I especially want to commend the work your recognition so early on that if the objective is to develop a highly skilled talent pool in the region, that does have to begin in early childhood. And the way you've laid out your whole agenda for PK-12 education, and the way you've laid out all the agreements between the UW system and the technical college system, it is a beautiful model. I know President Riley and I, who work on the PK-16 statewide leadership, that we would like to see every region in our state adopt. I think also what is so impressive is that you as a region are the only region in the state who have already identified the knowledge and the skills of 21st century workforce needs and expectations, and you've so clearly captured that in the slide here. And those directly model what we know in our work now in Wisconsin as one of only 3 in a nationwide group, the Partnership for 21st Century Skills, that you developed regionally what throughout our country has been really established as what employers are looking for. So I want to also point out a few things that are exceptional. The work with internationalizing, the global perspective that is infused throughout your approach here. So I just really have to say, from a statewide perspective as state superintendent, that this is the model that we really would like to see from a PK-16 perspective in aligning from early childhood all the way through higher education, the knowledge and skills we're expecting of our students, aligning that with workforce and post-secondary needs. So thank you very much. I talk about you all the time as I'm traveling throughout the state.
Thank you. Maybe just to follow on, thank you for that follow-on comment to that. You mentioned this effort is kind of around the nation, best of 3. And I was commenting on North Carolina. I didn't want to give anybody the impression that I didn't think we could be better than North Carolina. As a matter of fact, you know, the collaboration that is happening here, and the business and organizations and education at the table together, working together with models that are really as strong as anything in the nation, will leapfrog ahead, I think, of many others around the country because of the working together attitude. And it's very important.
But building on that one more minute, as Bob mentioned early on, we were doing a lot of benchmarking, and we were all about learning from others around the country as to what are some best practices that we can adopt here. So if we can learn from the other 2 that you consider to be top-notch in the country, that would be fantastic. We're always looking for great ideas, and we're very flexible and interested in learning so we can accelerate all the initiatives we have underway. Thank you.
About the importance of, or the significance maybe, not to make it a value-laden term, the significance of the growth agenda that Chancellor Wells and Oshkosh have laid out, and Chancellor Shepard and Green Bay have laid out, in terms of how does that fit into the New North, and how important is it, and what do you see the sort of the potential implications for it?
I think the key element is that the growth agenda, and as an investment in the educational capacity of New North, as long as it parallels the sort of the objective for a workforce that matches our development potential, our future economy, our next economy, if it incorporates those things, I think it's fantastic. I think it's simply an affirmation of the fact that you can't wish to become something. You have to invest in it. So frankly, without the investment behind the objective, it's never going to realize the potential that I think is behind that initiative.
I would just like to add that from a business standpoint, one of the biggest problems that we see in the business community right now is the contraction of the workforce, as we see a lot more people retiring in the future from the baby boomer generation. And we realized that probably as early as 2010, we're going to start to see labor constrictions that actually impact our ability to hire all the skills necessary. So any effort that goes on in the state of Wisconsin or in this region to actually provide that type of training for people and to make this a very attractive place for them to live and stay after they get their education is extremely important. And it doesn't always have to be college educated either. We collaborate with the technical colleges because those are some of the skills that are very necessary for business to find this an attractive place to locate and for us to continue whatever success we may have started within business. So I think it's all very important, and it's a component that's absolutely necessary for the New North platform to work.
I would add to that, you need to realize how tightly knit the New Era group and Chancellor Wells and that whole team is in the fabric of the organization of New North. It's critical. You've seen it in the objectives. The people that are working in the New Era group are, absolutely matched. We're matched with them. They're matched with us on the growth agenda. You heard about this applied baccalaureate degree as one of the initiatives. We had a strategic planning retreat this past Tuesday of our board. We've got a wonderful board, and we spent probably a half an hour talking about this applied baccalaureate degree model and how we could take joint business and education initiatives forward to use that as an example of how to make the stronger link between the needs of business and the development of people Larry's talking about, and the ability of educational institutions to match up and produce people for that. So this is a very, very, aligned strategy, and it's a very important strategy in this region.
What were the major barriers or challenges that you experienced, and what did you do to overcome them?
Want me to start? Okay. Maybe just a minute on how this all started. You heard about this economic opportunity study, which was a really strong basis for what to do, and that was sponsored by the workforce development organizations. Prior to New North and prior to the involvement of the business community, we've had many organizations, as most regions do, doing economic development. But it lacked, as Jerry said, perhaps a knitting together and a collaborative influence. So that was perhaps one of the barriers. I remember distinctly, maybe some of you are involved in tech groups and CEO kind of gatherings. We have several of those in northeastern Wisconsin, and one of them is a breakfast meeting that several of us get together about once every 2 months to talk about issues. And this was 4 years ago? 4 years ago. Kathy and I are on this same breakfast get-together. And 15 or 20 business leaders in the community, in the area, in the region, were there, and one of the topics for that particular month or 2 months was economic development because of all of the globalization and job loss and everything else. The paper industry in particular affecting this area, and we were all kind of feeling down in the mouth about what was happening, and that really generated the need. So maybe the next barrier is, do you recognize the need? And that morning we said, we've got a lot of great economic development groups, and New Era had already been operating around the region. What's business doing about it? Sitting back and saying, well, nothing's getting done, and we weren't getting engaged. So, as a good chairman, the fellow who was running this said, was there anybody who would volunteer to help lead this effort? Have you ever been in that situation where you had to raise your hand? And there was a kind of a pause in the room, and Kathy and I both raised our hand and said, well, we'll lead it. So that's how that started. And as soon as a couple people raised their hand, a bunch of other people raised their hand. And so I guess then the third barrier was getting people to raise their hand and help.
And Building on that, you can imagine with 18 counties that they all have their own turf issues and desires to grow, and you had all these different groups that had their respective missions and accountabilities, and to get everybody to play team ball, it just took a lot of discussions. But we demonstrated it by bringing competitors together at the table. Bob heads up Bolt Construction. We also had Phil Martini, who's C.R. Meyer. They're competitors, but they came together as business leaders together. I retired from Kimberly-Clark after being there for 28 years. I was there along with somebody from Procter & Gamble. So we were demonstrating that even though we were competitors in the marketplace, we could work together toward a common goal. And when we did have somebody that didn't want to play team ball, we would ask one of the board members to go take them for a walk and tell them, you know, it's not about not appreciating what you are doing as an individual or as an organization. We love you and we need you, but we can be a whole lot more effective and powerful if we arm ourselves together and march toward a common goal and a common vision. And it really has taken on tremendous momentum and inertia in the region. People now want to be involved. Jerry's getting a lot of calls, or we're getting messages through our website. By the way, if you haven't checked out our website, thenewnorth.com, we got a lot of people coming in that way, but people want to be engaged. We are getting invited to lots of different groups around the region to learn more about it, so people really want to be part of the initiative.
I just want to say that I was not in the room and didn't perceive the pressure to raise my hand.
But he has been a great supporter. And having one more thing I should say is, as Bob mentioned, we did a lot of benchmarking at the front end of this thing. And something we learned is that it's so important to have the educators at the table, but it's so important to have business leaders also at the table. Because it's the business leaders who can help finance this. We've gotten great support from the state, but it needs to be matched from a private sector standpoint. And I have to commend Bolt and WPS for being incredibly gracious in providing significant in-kind resources, which has been critical to our success. So having business leaders at the team will not only help us understand what are the job skills required for the future, which we all need to be aligned with, but also they can provide resources that are very important to have.
There are several of us at this table who are residents of the New North. I'm a resident of Green Bay, and it's been very exciting to to know of the energy that's being generated out of this. I'd like to ask a question about you're addressing the needs of the region in light of the increasing diversity of our area.
One of our teams is all about promoting and embracing diversity in our region, and what we've done is we've put together a diversity committee with folks from all over the region, and we have a vision that we want northeastern Wisconsin to be welcoming and inclusive and encouraging everyone to achieve their full potential. To that end, we have a vision, mission, and a set of strategies and priorities that are in English, Hmong, and Hispanic. And Hmong and Hispanic are the two growing ethnic groups in our particular region of the state. And we have put together a business case where we are going out and talking to different organizations in the region, talking about the importance of embracing diversity. We are also creating an award, a diversity award, that we're just starting to announce in the region so that we can in fact highlight and recognize organizations of different sizes who have been very proactive and visionary from a diversity standpoint, so we can in fact give them recognition as well as have them serve as a role model for others in the state, which is terrific. And we're also working with minority-owned businesses and really trying to make sure that we are advocates of them and making sure that it's clearly understood for their purposes what are all the resources available in the region to make sure that they have the support they need to grow as well. We've got very strong growing diversity in the region, and we want to make sure as business leaders we are all fostering an environment where everybody can achieve their full potential.
Regent Bradley.
If I'm a high school senior and I live in New North, I'll stay here for the rest of my life. I could go to UW-Oshkosh. I have to make the decision of whether I'm going to spend the money to get that college degree. Does New North, I'm healthy, productive, I'll be here the rest of my life, I have a high school education. Does New North want me to go to college and get that degree, and why?
One of the driving discovery points in the opportunity study was the realization that within New North, the post-secondary degree acquisition for the population, and I think it was in the 18 to 24, 25, whatever that age group, and it was discovered that the percentage was something like 18%, which relative to a competitive posture, particularly a posture of trying to describe New North as a place where technology is readily infused in the marketplace. If the only point that any business went to make a discriminating decision about locating an investment in New North or locating the same investment in any other part of the country or the world was the assurance or affirmation of the confidence that the workforce was going to be of the highest caliber, the most technologically sound, we were going to not show up. If all they did was basically look at the standard statistical information and compare us to the United States average, we were simply not going to show up. So there isn't just a little value or importance wrapped around the Educational Attainment Committee for that as an initiative of New North. It's a huge, huge point. It's a critical component. Now, to answer your question directly, though, if that individual were going on to a post-secondary degree, what I would hope is that at some point there would be at least the connectivity between that person's career aspirations and this marketplace. If they want to stay here, if they want to add value as a member of the workforce at a higher technology acquired level, and frankly they're going to need it. But if that's the case, then we're responding to that difference between the national or state average and our performance. And frankly, we're doing that with an eye or a sense that it's connected to the economy in general. Now, there's lots of good reasons why the numbers are what they are. This is a manufacturing marketplace where, frankly, people didn't need to go to a post-secondary level of education to get a great job. But that time has turned, and I think that people recognize that. Now, it won't take us a lifetime to catch up to those average statistics, but it will take time. And frankly, not only just the acquiring of an advanced degree, but an advanced degree that somehow complements the balance of the economy in New North.
I'd just like to add a real-life story about that. Carly Farini, who was at one time the CEO of Hewlett-Packard, saw her speak one time, and she said, you know, there's a lot of people around the country who contact me and encourage me to build the next Hewlett-Packard manufacturing plant or technology center in their area of the country. And the first question that I ask them is, show me the workforce that's going to show up at this plant every day and actually run this high-tech operation. And so if you don't have that here, if you don't have the college graduates, if you don't have the high-tech training that is necessary for those, you're simply not going to show up on the screen, as Jerry pointed out.
And I think one additional point would be we have to make sure we're creating an environment and an area and a place to live that caters to the aspirations from a personal lifestyle standpoint that these highly educated, you know, high aspiring young professionals want to be. And that's a different lifestyle perhaps than it was for myself and Jerry and Kathy. We have to know what that is, and we have to be doing that so people will want to come here in addition to want to stay here.
Question for Jerry. You mentioned that you think people recognize that the worm is turned and that you now will need some kind of post-secondary credential to be successful over the course of a career, whereas before in this region especially you really did not, to make a life-sustaining wage over the course of a working lifetime. Is that true? Do you think that the families and the kids in large part understand that? Sometimes I travel around the state. I wonder how deep that understanding or belief goes, and what occurs to me is that a group like New North, especially the business side of it, could play a very powerful role in helping to convince families and students that that really is the case. So do you have a feel for that?
Yeah, I think that there's sort of the workforce career path for any young person is motivated, as many of you all know, is motivated by different things. What I think has been the disconnect is that the career path for someone choosing an occupation in manufacturing or in agriculture, those are big markets for us. I think that there was a disconnect that was maybe a generation or two long, that the manufacturing investment in the last recession in technology was huge, so that coming out of the recession there may have been not necessarily the most robust return to unemployment or employment, but I don't know that people in the industry did a very good job, public relations, about what constitutes an occupation or a career path in the primary markets that we have in northeastern Wisconsin. I don't think they did that. Now, I think New North, frankly, the New Era organization and its association with New North can combine two things, and that is the academic path and New North's role in that is attaching that to our marketplace. That's an education in an education. The K-12 or pre-K, I mean, at what point do you start describing to a kid an appropriate career path or opportunity in New North? And what we're hearing from manufacturers or from business people is we can't start soon enough. That education, that part of the curriculum, that infusion of a sense of purpose and path, and frankly, it hasn't been done. So it's new work, frankly, I think.
Building on that, the Manufacturing Alliance that Jerry mentioned has been starting to be even more aggressive in spending time in K through 12. In fact, they mentioned to a couple of us the other day that 8th grade is a great place to spend time and really start talking about different career opportunities. And as we are talking about these opportunities, be it advanced manufacturing or ag, we've got to make sure that kids and parents and guidance counselors are all understanding and appreciating how advanced things are today. It's a whole different environment today than possibly their parents or grandparents worked in years ago. So we really have to be painting a very positive picture. The UW-GB, UW-Oshkosh, and the technical colleges have been very aggressive in this regard. We're also doing job fairs around the region where we can better display and visualize to students and their parents what kind of career opportunities are there out there in New North. One other point I'd like to make today is that I don't know at the front end of this that we realize the importance of media and having partners in the world of media help us get our story out. Because we can do a lot of meetings like we're doing today, but until we get the press out there to help us articulate what are some success stories out in the region and demonstrating what we're doing with New Era, demonstrating some success stories from an entrepreneurism standpoint, we have made great advances in getting the word out on New North because of the great partnerships we have had in the world of media in New North. So that has been a huge component that I don't think we appreciated at the front end of this.
Anybody else? Chris?
This is very exciting to hear about because being originally from this area 20 minutes down the road and seeing the impact that businesses can have on the communities. And I was in the perspective because I have my sister and her husband have a small business, and I was wondering how are you outreaching to small businesses? Because I see the cream of the crop of corporations of the Fox Valley region, but I think the heart and soul of what is great about the New North region is that we're filled with small businesses and entrepreneurs who are trying to create a new beginning. And I want to hear about maybe some of the way that you've been outreaching to the smaller businesses, and also about re-educating the workforce, because for an instance, I have a brother, he's 3 years older than me, and he was working in construction for a smaller firm, and now he has gone into doing appraisals, which is the highest up that he can go within his company because of he lacks higher education skills. However, he's hesitant to go back to college because of the cost that it takes to go back in the time, and he's not willing to understand. I don't want to bash him in public, but it's a little sibling rivalry, I guess. But I think corporations and the businesses need to be making that connection out there to some of those younger people who are older than me still, in their late 20s, early 30s, about the reasons why they need to go back to receive a bachelor's degree, or whether it's at our technical colleges, because I'm not sure what the future is going to look like in regards to workforce development 20 years from now. And I want to make sure that my family and the people who I went to school with in Rosendale had the same opportunities that I did receiving a bachelor's degree, and also making sure that there are going to be jobs around for them when 20 years comes down the road, and some of their jobs may be outsourced or may have moved to machines taking their current place.
You've asked several questions there, but maybe we can split it into two parts. One about small business and entrepreneurialism, and other about re-educated workforce. Kathy will talk about the re-educated workforce. I can start out on the business and entrepreneurialism. If you look at the statistics of economic growth and development, I think Jerry would bear this out, that in any region, what you find is that the engine for growth is with the companies that are there and with the entrepreneurialism and new ideas that provide startups that really get things going and keep things going. New companies coming into an area are important, but the companies that are here that expand and the new ideas that get started in entrepreneurialism are what really is the lifeblood. So we recognize that, and as a matter of fact, I think for those of you who know this part of the state, and actually the whole state, the history of this area is all about entrepreneurialism and the large companies that have grown out in this region. Many of them that were either in the paper industry or supported the paper industry came from small beginnings in the investments of family money. So we need to duplicate that, and we need to get that engine growing even stronger. And if you look at your large 11 by 17 sheet, one of the orange boxes, one of our strategies is entrepreneurialism and small business development, approximately those words. We have a strategic committee formed around that very objective, and the initiatives are listed there, a very dynamic committee who are dedicated toward just what you're talking about. We also have within the education initiative this Manufacturers Alliance, which is I forget what the number is now of members there, but 50 or 60 companies, small companies, manufacturing companies, who are coming together and meeting and saying, how can we further advance the manufacturing fabric in northeastern Wisconsin? Again, a huge collaborative. And so within those initiatives are very important things around entrepreneurialism and small business.
Regarding your brother and others in his similar position, bottom line, for the future, we need flexible and skilled labor in the region to meet the changing working needs. So that's the bottom line. So everybody, we really want to be flexible and skilled. But I have to tell you that there are tremendous resources available in the region. and there are tons of job openings. We did a survey about 6 months ago of a lot of the HR professionals in the region. We found that there were 1,000 hourly job openings and 500 salary job openings in the region. We've got all these job openings. Now the trick is, how do you find all the labor to fill all those needs? Because we have to protect the companies we have in the region and make sure that they are growing in a prosperous fashion. So that's what we are undertaking right now, to make it very transparent. What are the needs? How do we re-educate the workforce to fill those needs? But some of the resources that we would advise your brother and others to go to, the universities have centers that they can go to. The technical colleges have a lot of centers that they can go to, offices. The workforce development groups, I did not appreciate this while I was still working in corporate America, but they have a ton of resources. And we were over there the other day, and they have lists of different websites that you can go see, and they have all sorts of resources that are available there to help you brush up your resume, to understand where are the job openings. They have a process called Job Fit, where people can literally fill out their own profile. And there are a lot of companies that subscribe to Job Fit that are looking for maybe people with your brother's credentials. And they can, hone in on what's the best short list of people that they might want to talk to. They're also trying to keep pace with what are the needs of industry. Right now, there's a huge initiative in northeastern Wisconsin to really attack lean from a process standpoint, to really streamline operations in a company setting. Well, right now, the Workforce Development Group is trying to certify people to be lean capable, so those people are getting hired right away. So they're trying to keep pace along with the technical colleges and university systems in northeastern Wisconsin as to what are the current needs and how do you educate those people to be capable to take on some of the job openings, because they do exist.
I think entrepreneurial activity and innovation is an extremely important plank in New North, and there's a number of institutions in the area that support that. In just this book, I was scanning through this book to see what was in here to try and answer your question. And I know UW-Oshkosh has Council for Innovation, and they've got something called Origin, the Oshkosh Regional Innovation and Growth Incubator Network. I know there's an incubator in Green Bay that the Green Bay Chamber of Commerce incubates small businesses with. And then most recently, I think there's something called the New North Venture Capital Group, which provides funding for small startup businesses and stuff. And so a lot of that activity, some of it's been here for a while, like the incubation in Green Bay, but some of it has just started up recently, and it's all there to support entrepreneurs and innovation in this area, because this area, innovation, is extremely important to it.
Regent Rosenzweig.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for being here, and it is an inspiring story as you laid it out. And I can't imagine coming from the Milwaukee area, but we'll probably end with that we'll have quite as cohesive a group come together, and perhaps you can inspire them. But I guess I want to go back to President Riley's question about our effort in the growth agenda and how it connects actually with what you're doing. And I was really taken with the Hewlett Packard story about what it's going to take to get companies to come here, and as they look in the next 10 years about technology and so on. And I guess I also, just coming from that kind of world, that the press is important, and I thought that was important to raise, but ultimately it's going to be the public and the legislature that will determine whether this area has the resources, in fact, to connect the education with the needs of the group and the area. And I was wondering, have you done anything about a PR effort that would target the legislature and the broader public so that they understand that supporting the resources for this effort will make a really big difference to the individual families, to the institutions, and to the businesses all over this region?
A couple things. One, thank you very much for your kind comments. The connection of the growth agenda to the public and or the reverse track back to a legislative audience and the public at large, all of those are constituents, if you will, of this message. I mean, they all, what I think has been our focus or our challenge maybe is to take that kind of confusing message and steer it kind of consistently back to an outcome that is economic development. So if the growth agenda can be translated into a net positive benefit to the state and or this region in terms of its academic resources that complement that, I think people get that. People on the street get that. The real trick in connecting the dots, as I said in the presentation, is that it doesn't have to, the outcomes that are collectively describing the success of New North are a function of all of those collaborators. So the organization will, in and of its own right, have certain accomplishments, but we're going to celebrate the bejabbers out of everybody's success. We're going to celebrate it in the context of how it ultimately impacts economic development. I mean, that's going to be our myopia. But that, I think, is what's needed to have the legislators understand how this is connected. And I think that they want to hear that it's connected. And people on the street, it's confusing. So I think we've been, our goal or our objective is to try to keep it fairly simple and fairly directed to this net outcome. I hope that answers your question.
Maybe let me come at it from maybe a slightly different direction. I think this gets at your question, but coming from business, I often think about this problem as one of when it comes for the time for the customer to make a choice about whether they're going to choose your product or your service or somebody else's, it's all about your ability to articulate the difference that you have versus their other choices. Every customer is different, and this whole cadre of resources and assets, whether it's educational or the growth agenda, or whether it's do we have the workforce, or do people want to live in northeastern Wisconsin, whatever it is, it's a matter of bringing together the various constituents who can articulate the difference. So at the margin, when that company, in this context, is making a decision to expand here or to come here, you convince them enough so there's just a skosh more for you than somebody else. Very seldom these days, at least in business, do you win these decisions of sales and marketing by big margins. They're always very small, subtle differences. So let me just point out 3 examples of things that have happened, and there are many, many examples, but 3 examples of this kind of effort that brings together legislators, brings together state money, brings together local governments, brings together businesses and so forth to try to cause people to make decisions. There's a company in Neenah called Alta Resources. They're an offshoot of a startup that came out of people from Kimberly-Clark. They're a call center order fulfillment company. Some of you may know them. About 3 years ago, they were being courted away to expand. At that time, it was 400 jobs, and it's grown beyond that now, to Grand Rapids, Michigan. The CEO of that company happens to be part of this same breakfast group that I talked to you about, and he came to one of those meetings and said, I'm so frustrated, this was in the early days of New North, that I can't get the approvals, I can't get support. And we said to him, let's try to help with the small fabric that we have together. So with help from the state, with collaboration from the community in Neenah, and there was a permitting component that he was having trouble with the DNR. Scott Hassett came in with his people, and all of a sudden people came into the room talking to him about how can we help you, as opposed to how can we keep from helping you. He stayed. He built a new building in Neenah. That 400 more jobs has turned into 600 or 700 more jobs, and he stayed here rather than going to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Right as we speak, there's a little company that has been in the Appleton Industrial Park, not so little, Albany International. You may be familiar with them. They're supporters to the paper industry. Over this last several months, they've been making a decision as to whether they should shut down their plant here and consolidate it with their current facility down in Kentucky, or whether Kentucky should shut down and consolidate here. Well, if you drive north of Kaukauna and look on the north side of the road, you'll see a huge manufacturing plant being built, brand new for them. They've chosen to shut down Kentucky and bring their workforce and their process here. And those were the small things that the communities and the people were able to bring together so that at the margin, when it came to who he was going to choose, he chose us. Another bigger example is the fact that Procter & Gamble is just finishing this tissue machine expansion in Green Bay. That's the first paper machine that was built in Wisconsin for about the last 12 years. They had choices to put that in a lot of places in the United States. They chose here because of the collaboration with state support, local support, a little bit of New North influence. But I look at these things as a project at a time where you bring together not the general idea that everybody's helping, but the specific idea of what it's going to take to cause that company to choose you. And that's what it's about, one at a time. And then you can talk about the success stories and build on those. And it's about learning how to talk about ourselves in a convincing way so companies choose us. So I don't know if that helps or not, but.
I want to thank you for your presentation. It's very positive, solution-oriented, and the collaboration idea and the evidence is just tremendous. I also thank you for reminding me why people say that Madison is 40 square miles surrounded by reality. Down in Madison, where I'm from, you usually hear more of the shrillness about taxes and messages from WMC, and why we also on the other side why we can't do anything unless government's involved. And this is the third presentation that I've seen from business people from the near north all the way up to Green Bay. And I'm particularly reminded by the presentation made at UW at Green Bay when I saw all the community leaders and all the business leaders talking about what's good for their community and why it was important that it be collaboration with higher education. And that message I took back to the legislature over and over and talked about it. And it made a difference, and it certainly made a difference with Governor Doyle because he saw that as an alternative to the shrillness we often hear about and from business. And I want to personally thank you for this presentation because it's another example. And another part of this is that you have the great companies of this part of the state, Wisconsin Public Service Corporation, Bolt Construction, Kimberly-Clark. I mean, you're at the table by yourselves finding a solution for your people, and that's wonderful. And the idea that you can marry it with higher education tells me that we've got a better story than we ever thought we had about why we need to reinvest in higher education in Wisconsin. And as President of the Board of Regents, I thank you for that.
Well, I'm once again pleased to have the opportunity to present to this board Achieving Excellence, the UW Systems Accountability Report. A copy of this year's report is in your materials. This is lucky number 13 for the system-wide accountability report. It made its debut in 1995. At that time, as many of you know, the UW system was one of the very first in the nation to adopt a system-wide accountability report, and today we still serve as a model for many states in this regard. The report, Achieving Excellence, is not intended to be a fully comprehensive report on all possible measures of a university's success, but it is one way for us to report back to the many people who have a stake in the well-being of this university. The report tracks several quantitative calculations, and we also include measures from self-reports by students and alumni. Achieving excellence also allows us to internally assess our progress. This is a function of both quantity and quality. It's a look at not just what we do, but how well we do it. The institutional accountability reports, those from the individual campuses and extension, give us a sense of the different missions and goals that our institutions achieve within the UW system. The measures in these campus reports include goals like serving non-traditional and transfer students, preparing students for professional careers, outreach to Wisconsin citizens, and providing opportunities for undergraduate research, service learning, and study across academic disciplines. Today is only the first reporting of the good news and the challenges in the Achieving Excellence reports. Over the next few weeks, we'll share the report internally with our provosts, admissions officers, public information officers, institutional researchers, and others on our campuses so we can all reach a system-wide understanding of our progress. I also want you to know that I use these institutional reports in my performance evaluation with chancellors, and they are helpful tools. Equally important, we'll share the report externally. We'll share it with our colleagues in K-12 and the tech college system. In some respects, our success, I think, on many of the measures in the accountability report is tied to their fortunes as well. We will share a copy of the report with every Wisconsin senator and representative, with the governor, and with our federal representatives in Washington. And because we want the students, families, and Wisconsin taxpayers who support this university to know about our progress, as always, the report is available to the public at wisconsin.edu. So I've asked Sharon Wilhelm from our Office of Policy Analysis and Research to walk us through this year's findings, and then I'll come back on when Sharon is through and update you briefly about next steps regarding accountability. So with that, Sharon.
Thank you, President Riley. That panel is a tough act to follow, but good morning. This accountability report is designed to provide a broad array of information regarding the UW system's progress towards achieving excellence. As President Riley indicated, it is not feasible to include every possible area of university activity in the scope of the report, but careful attention is given to addressing a wide diversity of stakeholder interests through a balanced approach. The report is divided into 3 parts, each section providing an essential piece of the UW system story. Section 1, the context and capacity section, provides background for the remainder of the report and offers some insight into the context in which UW institutions function. Therefore, there are no accountability goals or benchmarks in this section. Section 2 of the report, the goals and indicators section, provides 6 specific goals and indicators associated with the goals. These 6 goals emphasize the UW system service to students, particularly undergraduate students. They are, in brief, 1, to ensure widespread access to UW, 2, increase student persistence in degree completion, 3, improve learning competencies, 4, prepare students for a dynamic world community, 5, provide opportunities and student services that enhance the learning environment, and 6, exercise efficient and effective stewardship of resources. Where possible, UW system performance on the goals is compared to national benchmarks. In areas where there are no national benchmarks, or in cases where we already had goals beyond the national benchmarks, targets were developed. And finally, Section 3 of the report is a compendium of other specialized reports on various aspects of the UW system. Reports that also measure excellence in the UW system beyond those reported in the report. Each edition of Achieving Excellence reports findings from a series of surveys, including the ACT Alumni Outcome Survey and the National Survey of Student Engagement, NSSE. Each of these surveys provides national benchmarks, affording the opportunity to make comparisons of UW system performance with that of other higher education institutions. The current report incorporates data from the 2006 NSSE report. Next year's report will incorporate data from the ACT Alumni Outcome Survey, which we expect to field in the next few months. In the report, pages Roman numerals 2 through 5, you will find a brief summary of the 6 accountability goals and the 20 associated indicators. plus a marker identifying progress for each indicator. Progress is marked by one of the following: a check mark, which indicates the target has been achieved, a minus to indicate we did not achieve the target for that indicator, and a combination of a check and minus to indicate mixed performance. That is, portions of the overall target measured by the indicator were realized, but some were not. The summary indicates that the UW system met or partially met 17 of the 20 measures, with 3 remaining targets yet to be achieved. Before I describe the UW system's outcomes in more details, let me mention some of the changes and additions to this year's report. First, access for students from lower income families has been added in response to the board discussion of last year's report. Second, access, retention, and graduation rates for men and women have been added in response to the May 2006 report by the Staffs of Women Working Group. And 3, the UW system goal for study abroad has been modified to emphasize continual increase in graduates who have studied abroad rather than a specific numeric target. Challenges identified in this report are: the UW system has not yet achieved its diversity-related goals. A gap persists between the rate at which Wisconsin high school graduates of color enrolled in the UW system compared to white students. Also, a gap persists between the retention and graduation rates of students of color compared with white students. And finally, enrollments in pre-college programs declined slightly from last year. In addition, while the numbers of students studying abroad continues to increase, but UW seniors reported fewer experiences of other kinds, such as interaction with students from different religious, political, or racial and ethnic backgrounds that would prepare them for a diverse world, compared with seniors nationally. And finally, UW seniors continue to rank us lower than seniors nationally on the quality of our academic advising. But there is much good news in this report. The UW system continues to provide access for 33% of Wisconsin high school graduates. The system's 6-year graduation rate increased to 64.2%, exceeding our long-term goal of 64%. And system-wide retention rates remain above the national average. The average number of credits attempted on the path to a bachelor's degree decreased again to now stands at 134 credits, down from 145 in 1993-94. And seniors continue to give the UW system high marks on fostering critical thinking, planned learning experiences outside the classroom, faculty mentoring, and activities that promote good citizenship. It is important to note that budget enrollment pressures have forced UW institutions to make some difficult compromises. For example, although the number of adult non-traditional students being served increased slightly from last year, it remains lower than 10 years ago, while the UW system has preserved access for students right out of high school. And finally, I'd like to draw your attention to the institutional accountability reports. As in the past, this year's report includes supplemental campus reports that indicate how each UW institution performs on 4 common measures. 1, enrollment. 2, retention and graduation rates. 3, student involvement. And 4, credits to degree. In addition, these reports also reflect measures that are specific to particular institutions and that are developed from institution strategic planning processes of those specific campuses. I'd be happy to answer questions on the report after President Riley makes some concluding remarks. President Riley?
Thank you, Sharon. And I want to thank Sharon and her colleagues in the system office and across the campuses for their very thorough professional work on this report. It's that very competent, dedicated work that makes this report a state and national model. So thank you, Sharon. As in previous years, I want to note that we see today where we are not achieving the goals we've established, in large part, are goals related to diversity. The accountability report shows that we're making some incremental progress, but we know we are not where we want to be in terms of diversity and academic success and inclusion for all UW students, faculty, and staff. You heard yesterday from the campuses that are participating in the pilots of the Equity Scorecard Project. These pilots are a good example of how we can and are using the accountability report. We took the knowledge we gained from this accountability report and launched the equity scorecard pilots as strategic ways to figure out why we're missing these targets and what specific steps we might take to solve the problems our campuses are finding in this regard. This was a great presentation by the New North and a lot related to the growth agenda, same with New Era yesterday, but I think we ought to be clear on this. We cannot achieve the goals of the New North. We cannot achieve the goals of the New Era. We cannot achieve the goals of the growth agenda unless we do a better job on the indicators around diversity. Given the population of this state, given the demographics currently and in the future, we have to get a much broader, deeper cut of our school kids coming into post-secondary education, and those kids are increasingly kids of color. Unless that changes, we cannot get the number of college degree people in this state we need to have to be successful as a state in the 21st century economy. So an awful lot hinges on our improving the indicators where we have not seen enough improvement. 6 of our institutions, as you know, the ones you heard from yesterday, are participating in the Equity Scorecard project at this time, since the project is still a pilot in that sense. But I think you know, and I want to emphasize that other of our campuses are very actively engaged in similar work. And representatives, obviously, from those campuses are here today and might want to say a word or two about what they're doing. Provost Hammersmith, do you want to talk a little bit about Green Bay's efforts?
Thank you for recognizing the work going on across the state. At UW Green Bay, we have been working on improving significant gaps between our minority and majority student achievement. And I just wanted to share with you a few of the things that we have done and what some of the results are. You will see that we have been influenced in this very much by the Equity Scorecard project and that methodology as well. One of the things that we're doing is we know that we do not have equal access among our minority and majority populations to higher education. And this year we have made a significant decision to institutionalize the Future Phoenix program, with which you are familiar, which started in 2002 and since then has operated on a voluntary basis and with philanthropic support. To date, over 4,600 students have become involved in the Future Phoenix project in our area. As 5th graders, they come to campus, they have a campus visit, they hear about college, and initially it began that they then had an upper level, a college student who would be their role model and mentor them. What we have done as we've institutionalized this program is we have completely integrated it into our teacher education program so that our teacher education students, all of them, serve as mentors and role models, tutors, and as volunteers. They contribute hundreds of hours each semester in the public schools. In addition to hosting students on the campus visits, they go out into the public schools and follow those students each year after their 5th grade visit to campus. They do workshops in the schools. They have meetings with the parents so that they really are working closely with the local school districts to develop a pipeline of talent, of minority students who will be ready to come into college and to succeed. The original students in that program are now 10th graders. And we have, again, as part of institutionalizing this program, we have incorporated them into our pre-college programs. Our pre-college programs have a very high success rate of producing students who do graduate from high school, who do enroll in college, and who do succeed in college. So that's another step we've taken. We also have raised over $40,000 of scholarship money that will be waiting for those students when they are ready for college, and that is significant. Another thing that we have done is we've focused our recruitment efforts on our local Northeast Wisconsin minority students. And when we did our equity analysis, one interesting thing we found was that where we're losing the minority students is in the step of completing the application. If the students get the application completed, they are admitted and enrolled at the same proportion as our majority students. And we never would have been able to get that. Dr. Bestimoni was talking yesterday about the importance of being able to just get a few things to focus on to really make a difference. So in the past year, we have hired student workers. Every single minority student who has made a contact with the university, started the project, but not completed the application, they get personal phone calls until it's done. As a result, this past fall semester, our number of minority students among the incoming freshman class was up 67% compared to 1 year earlier. That shows some of the payoff you can get by, again, just looking at specific measures. Our number of incoming graduate students who are minority students are up 68% this year over the previous year. And we continue, of course, to work on additional articulation agreements and recruitment arrangements with both the College Menominee Nation and with our local technical college, and of course we continue our good relations with the UW colleges. Another thing we did is to look at, and this is in the category of excellence, we did an analysis of the gateway courses. And we have 16 general education courses that almost all incoming students take. And when we looked at the performance of minority and majority students in those courses, we found that there are a few courses where they're performing equitably. But in the majority of courses, they're not. And so this year, we've made available a grant program to faculty who are teaching those specific courses, who can redesign those courses to incorporate more active learning and some of the national models that we know are successful with minority students. The result of that will be, I am confident, greater equity in those courses, and then that will have a domino effect on everything else. If students have equitable success in those freshman level courses, those gateway courses, they have higher grade point averages, they have higher retention rates, they have better access to all of our majors, including our selective majors. And so through the years, we will expect that to have a domino effect, and that's why we're focusing specifically on those early courses. Finally, I'd like to mention one other thing. Under the Chancellor's leadership, we have tried to be very creative and proactive in diversifying our faculty and our staff. One of the measures that is used in the equity scorecard analysis is, do you have a gap between your student body and your faculty and staff in terms of minority representation? When we completed our analysis of that particular measure this fall, I am delighted to report University of Wisconsin-Green Bay has no gap. We are the first institution I've ever worked at that can make that claim. And that means that we have some actions that have been successful, and we will continue those so that we can continue minority representation among our faculty and staff, even as representation is increasing in our undergraduate students. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Anybody else? Provost Pat Farrell from Madison.
Thanks. Sorry I missed the equity scorecard discussion yesterday, but you might know that Madison is not currently an active participant, not for lack of enthusiasm, but because we had programs in place already when the equity scorecard came online, and felt that given what we had in place, we would pursue those since they paralleled quite well what we thought the equity scorecard would provide for us. So I wanted to make maybe just a couple comments and then go away. We tend to look at, focus on both ends. Who comes and how successful are they? So let me start at the back end. How successful are they? So the criteria, the quantitative indicators you might want to use are in the accountability report. These are things like what's the retention rate? So how persistent are students, both the majority and minority students, from year 1 to year 2 and so on through graduation? What's the graduation rate? Is there a significant difference? And in particular, in our case, what's happening to that, what we will call this graduation gap? So when we look, we're typically, the number we pay most attention to is the 6-year graduation rate. And so, of course, it takes a while for those cohorts to move through. So right now, in a sense, you could say we're looking at the year 2000 cohort, the students who began in year 2000 and we hope would have graduated in 2006. And we look at the gap between those two, and you can compare that to perhaps what that gap was 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, that gap looked like about a 20% gap between majority students and minority students in terms of 6-year graduation rates. We don't have the numbers for the cohorts that have begun as 2000, 2001 yet, but based on information we do have, we expect that gap to be cut in half. There still is one, but we expect that to be more like 10%. And the reason we expect that, or the evidence that suggests that's going to happen, is looking at the first year, second year, third year retention rates, which have maintained fairly stable or increased slightly for majority students and have increased dramatically for minority students. So students are staying with us. The students that come are staying with us. More of them are staying with us and clearly are being successful in heading towards degrees. So we find that encouraging, but clearly the work is not done because that gap is not yet 0, which is obviously where it should be. On the other end, who comes? We've done, we think, reasonably well. Again, not as well as we'd like, but reasonably well. Last fall, our entering freshman class was about 14% minority. That's a continual climb, slow but steady. So we're happy to see that that's happening. Like everybody else, the challenges to recruiting a diverse class are similar to others, maybe a little different for us because it's so competitive to get into Madison in the first place. And of course, these students compete with everybody else. They need the credentials that everybody else needs, so there's no particular class of students that we're talking about. On the other hand, we tell every student who comes in the door, we don't admit you if we don't think you'll be successful. And we'll provide the tools you need to be successful. So a lot of the work that goes into getting students to Madison and getting them to stay and be successful and graduate is the stuff that most of us, perhaps many of you, don't see. And that's the huge number of people who really devote a lot of their career to the success of students, not just minority students, but success of students who come most fairly well prepared, but that preparation varies in terms of areas they're well prepared in, areas they're not. As you probably know, if you remember back to student days, almost every student who comes in has a bit of a shock at how challenging, competitive, difficult college is. And as I tell students, we make no apologies. I make no apologies that they're going to have to work hard when they come to Madison. That's our job, is to make them work hard. But our job is also to help them be successful. And so that's, in a sense, where we think the progress we've been able to make has been in that groundwork that it takes to help students who perhaps come, perhaps struggle, perhaps have other issues, find ways to resolve those, move on, be successful, graduate, go do something else. That's roughly where we think we are. I might add a slight little teaser for fall, this coming fall 2007. Of course, we're not finished getting our freshman class in. We're in the process now where all the admit letters have gone out. We're waiting to get deposits. It's going to be a tight year. The yield is up a little bit. Don't print that. Our LNS dean will be worried. But we're seeing, again, a significant increase in the number of minority admits, meaning students that we've looked at their record and we'd like to have them come. We don't know yet, since May 1st is our deadline for commitments from students. We don't know how many actually will. What we have to date is actually a substantial increase over that of students who have committed to come. minority students are committed to come. So we'll see what the numbers turn out, but right now we're optimistic that we'll see yet again an increase in minority enrollment for our freshman class for fall. I think that's what I had to say.
Thank you, Pat. Well, just to conclude, I want to remind the board that this conversation on accountability generally and on the diversity component in particular is not the last you'll hear this month. That is, in June, we'll come back to you with an update on our Plan 2008. That presentation then at the June board meeting will be a chance for you to consider questions about the diversity goals that we've set for this university, to think about where we need to be going forward next year and 5 years and 10 years. I personally like the approach used in the equity scorecard process very much. That is, systematically studying our institutions to find out where the problems exist, and then using what we learn to implement responsive solutions that are really targeted appropriately for each campus. Because although the problems are often similar from campus to campus, the solutions may not necessarily be so. And the work we're doing through the equity scorecard process has been a revelation for many of us, I think, in terms of thinking about real solutions targeted to particular problems around closing that gap. So with that, I want to thank you for listening, and Sharon and I and our colleagues from the institutions would be happy to take any questions you have about this or hear your comments. Regent Davis.
This is a time when I absolutely hate that Jesus isn't here, because as we all have experienced, that he'd have his accountability report and all of the institutions, and he'd have Post-its all surrounding him, indicating that he has read every single word, and he comes chock full of questions that yield a deeper learning for myself. So I miss that he isn't here for that, and I wish he could hear that in Texas. But at any rate, I did read it, and I really appreciate the approach that you've taken, Kevin and Sharon, in acknowledging what's wrong with this picture from a diversity perspective. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the heightened appreciation for the equity scorecard methodology, because I think that I'm really pretty darn tired of reading these reports and seeing no progress, or seeing digression, or a lack, not only a lack of progress, but a retrenchment, if you will, with respect to achievement gaps between students of color and white students. And I'm optimistic that through those institutions who have chosen to, as I mentioned yesterday, volunteer to participate in that process that engages more entities, if you will, across a campus in the discovery, the learning, the laser focusedness, if there's such a word, on where are the problems before, as a way of coming up with solutions that will actually make a difference. I commend them again for having stepped forward in that regard, because I think until something like that is institutionalized, if you will, as a process, and not saying that say, for example, UW-Madison's approach isn't also equally good, because as I understand it, it is also consistent in terms of the breadth across the campus and the depth of the analysis, if you will, in coming up with solutions. But I think we got to do things differently in approaching this gap issue, be it enrollment gap, be it graduation gap, be it retention first to second year, because otherwise, at some point, we should be pretty darn ashamed of ourselves if we cannot make progress in this institution. And I don't want to get to that point. I really do want to see that we, as smart as we are, as committed as we are, that we can actually make a difference for all students in this state. I look at the demographic information on page 2 that talks about the proportion of public high school graduates who are students of color is projected to increase from 14% in 2005 to 22% in 2018. I mean, there's ample evidence that we've got to do better. So I guess I just need to say that, and then I do have a question for you, Sharon. And I do want to commend you for all of the work and your dedication as well in this project. And I really appreciate the fact that you incorporated the concerns from the entities that you mentioned into this version of the accountability reports. I want to commend you for that as well. But on page 5 and 6, there is a, what do you want to call this, a table, a chart, that is headed UW System service rates for Wisconsin immediate new freshman students of color and white students. And then the next page, there's a chart that's UW Systems, is that the right one? Yeah, of Wisconsin immediate new freshman students of color. What's the difference in the portrayal as regards students of color between these two charts? Because one seems to say flat, and then the other seems to say increase, and I was a little bit confused.
Okay. The second chart that you referenced is the enrollments of at the UW system.
Okay.
And so we're seeing over time increases.
Okay.
Very good news.
Okay.
And in contrast, though, what the previous chart talks about is the proportion of high school graduates that come. So while the number of students of color in the UW system is increasing, the number of students of color graduating from high school is increasing at a greater proportion, and so therefore then that service rate or access rate, whatever you want to call it, is you know, not seeing the positive increases like the enrollment numbers themselves.
Thank you. Thank you.
Regent Crane.
I want to say that I think it's a very good thing that the gender information has been included as a result of the report on the status of women working group, and I personally would like to see that breakdown within the diversity groups as well. I think that's important information as we consider what our challenges are. And then this is just a small suggestion about the way things are laid out on the goals on the first pages. I had a hard time trying to figure out what those little marks meant because I don't think there's a key anyplace. And I just, in presenting that information to people who are going to read this, you might find a way in the future. So.
Good point. Regent Bartel, and then we'll come over to the other side.
Thank you. I am so impressed with the Future Phoenix program and the related actions of UW Green Bay trying to reach students in the high school and below and connect them with with college experience. I think it is critically important to put a mindset into kids at that age that this is the natural progression. This is where you go. And it isn't so scary. You know, I mean, there are people there who will help you. There are people there who you can associate with and understand. I think that is a critical aspect of the growth agenda and attracting the students that we want to attract. And that's why it's so discouraging to see a decline in the pre-college program metrics in this report. And I'm wondering, we have chancellors sitting back here. How do we spread this word? How do we get this kind of a program spread across the system so that we are doing all that we can to reach kids at the right age and at the right time? We have the governor's covenant coming, and I think that's wonderful. I think that that's a real good framework for this. But the kinds of things that UW Green Bay is doing to bring kids into the college community and introduce them to these to that community, I think it's something that we should be doing across the system.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm going to ask in a minute Sharon maybe to make a comment on why that dipped, but if any of the chancellors want to talk about the pre-college work they do currently on their campuses, be happy to give people an opportunity. I know more and more of them have such programs, and I think they're meeting with some success. Rita.
had an impact on us.
Vicki, do you want to comment on that?
Changes in GERA funding. DPI changed its eligibility criteria for its pre-college dollars, and our pre-college budget hasn't increased relative to the growth in population of M&D students. And so our campuses are really strapped for resources in order to serve a larger proportionate number of students through our M&D pre-college programs, which is in part what you're seeing there. There are a lot of other pre-college programs, but with respect to those funded by the campuses for purposes of multicultural and disadvantaged students, our budgets just haven't been able to keep up with the growth in the student population in the state, the eligible student population.
Brian.
I want to echo, I think, what we were hearing, in that one of our premier programs for many years, for example, in bringing in really middle school age kids to have a college experience, low-income students, was a national youth sports program, and extremely popular on campus, another gateway to introduce those students to what college is about and sort of raise the horizons, their expectation horizons. And that funding is all but gone at this point. And so we've been trying to keep that going through some institutional funds and just the commitment of staff to make that happen. But again, that funding is part of the issue here. Yep. On the other hand, I think the Phoenix program has been done with some pretty bare bones funding, and that's a way to reach out to in a gear up sort of manner to a number of campuses and introduce those students and follow through. And I think we can all look at that model.
Yeah. Jerry, the provost at UW-Parkside, and then come back to Chancellor Wells.
Thank you. I wanted to say one thing about the funding that hasn't been, excuse me, raised, and that is that the DPI, the funding that we get from the state, is based on a predicted enrollment. And so that then when you get an enrollment shortfall because of eligibility, the funds coming in the following year don't cover the expenditures. And so you wind up using more institutional funds to be able to keep that going. So it's not only the amount of funding, generally speaking, but how it arrives, because it's always difficult to plan when you aren't starting with a budget that's real but's anticipated based on the number of students that you're going to serve. The other thing that to mention, I'm sure this is true on many other campuses, the 402 funding for a number of other programs like our Multicultural Student Affairs Office does have some bridge programs, has started a new program called Always Reaching Upward, where they're going out into the schools at a higher rate than they used to before. And so we're trying as best we can in the limits of our resources to pool together all of those areas on campus that have such interests, including in our bioscience area, summer camps for students of color. But again, we're limited in what we can do precisely because of that overall funding.
Thanks, Jerry. Rick, and then back to Dick Telfer.
The bare bones part of the budget for the future Phoenix program, just for the record, is the exploitation of Chancellor Shepard of his wife, Cindy Shepard. This is true. I'm not kidding you. You don't know how much time she puts in. Many of you do in that program. Aside of how to fund it, I was very struck, and it reminded me of a program I was involved in way back when I was at Westchester University. I think it was Whitewater Summer Program. I think you remember seeing your presentation in one spot where they were meeting and exceeding in terms of the gap analysis was the students that went through that program. And that's the kind of program, in addition to getting in the schools, that we've got to figure out how to fund. When I was at Westchester, there was federal funding for this, so I'm not going to talk about the cost, I'm going to talk about the benefit. But what we did is we would admit a number of students, and then about 300 students, we would tell them that we weren't admitting them into Westchester University, so right outside of Philly, and this was typically a pretty diverse group of students. They could reapply for this, it was called then an AOP, Academic Opportunity Program. This is 20 years ago or so. And so we wanted to see, we were looking for their motivation to reapply. A number of them would reapply. We'd interview them. We'd look for somebody significant in their family that was very supportive of their desire to go on to post-secondary education, or outside the family. It could be a teacher, it could be a minister, and we'd find that person to agree to partner with that individual through their 4 years of going at Westchester. Then they had to agree to come 3 weeks before in the summer. Sounds similar to what Whitewater's already doing. And then they had to stay in the program for 4 years. All of their success factors in the classes, the retention rate, distributions across majors, the graduation rates were at or above the regular student body that didn't go through that program. So we know how to do this. The problem is you get in the political side of it where people are concerned about, well, these students should have been better served in K through 12, and why are we involved in higher education remediation? And my response to that, so what? They're human beings, they're there. We have to do what we have to do on both ends. So I think if we do things like that, try to figure out how to replicate Future Phoenix in the Whitewater program, we'll start seeing some results.
The piece that I wanted to comment on are really two pieces. One is many of us supplement what we're doing in the summer with grants, the kinds of federal grants that we have, and they're getting harder to come by. The second part of it, and I just want to say on our campus, our program is not as large as Milwaukee, but we are in the range of 1,000 students each year. 15% of them this year were sponsored by campus because the funding isn't there that was there before. Thank you all.
Just one last point. The pre-college directors are acutely aware of this problem, and so we've organized a task force under the auspices of OAD to begin to come up with strategies and recommendations and to really look at what we can do to interrupt this current trend and decline.
Thank you. Bruce.
Just a brief comment on, thanks for all the kind words on Future Phoenix. And what we hear is each of our campuses has a diversity of approaches, and we all learn from each other, and that's really in this difficult area a very important thing to realize about one of the strengths of being a part of a system. But I wanted to distinguish Future Phoenix in one way from the sort of traditional pre-college programs we had on our campus and continue to have on our campus. And being a typical man, my wife had explained this to me 3 times before I finally got it, that she's a professional educator. And I kept saying, we go into the high schools, we go into the junior high schools. She told me you're simply recruiting the people who are already predestined to graduate and go on to high school, but that's as far as you go. Being the educator, she knows that the self-concept is the jargon is really pretty much firmed up in 5th grade. And if college is not in people's aspirations by 5th grade, you've got to get in there and get it. And that's the wrinkle we have added to our more traditional pre-college programs with Future Phoenix.
That's great. Now, let me say that we're in discussions with the American Council on Education now to bring a national program that they're launching called Know How to Go to Wisconsin. This is a program they put together with the Ad Council. It's media-based. It's TV, radio, and internet aimed at kids in late elementary school and their parents about what they need to know about going to college. And again, I go back to, I guess it was Provost Cheng's remark about, or somebody saying that, was it you, Rita, where you lose a lot of the kids at the application stage. You know, some things we take for granted, families, first-generation families don't know. How do you get through that onerous process of filling out the forms? Know how to go. We've got to do a lot better job of getting that information out more widely to the pre-college population, and we'll work, we hope, start to work soon with our own media outlets in the state and the American Council on Education and the Ad Council to do that. I want to come back over to this side of the table because I think some Regents had questions. He did. Regent Pruitt, okay. Anybody else? Regent Bradley.
Sharon, I have 2 questions. Throughout here, there are several comments about we seem to be hitting a lot of teaching goals, but we're falling short on some of the academic advising goals. Is there a direct correlation to that's where a lot of the budget cuts were placed by the campuses on the academic support as opposed to faculty and staff in the classroom?
That answer probably can be best answered by the campuses, but I do want to interject that there is an advisor task force that is looking at this very carefully. Also, I think as President Riley said, this report does generate a lot of conversations within system admin and the campuses, and there is an advisor task force trying to zero in on the issues closer. But in terms of the impact on the budget, maybe a campus would like to respond to that.
I can respond that the difficulty is that the question doesn't drill down to what advising experience. Was it a poor experience your freshman year? Was it something later on? Is it your main advisor? Was it some other office on campus? We currently have a campus survey out to our students asking some specific questions, and that survey was designed by our advising network on campus to really drill down into what are the services that students feel positive about and what services can we improve. I would also like to comment that advisors were considered administrators in our budget cuts several years ago, and so we have not been able to keep the advising levels at our optimum amount, and so we have advisors on campus that have loads of 600 or 700 students, and it's very hard to have a high quality advising operation with that kind of student load.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
I have just a small question. When we look at trying to evaluate our learning outcomes, how successful we are, we look at the UW system students who took the graduate record exam and the medical college entrance exam and the CPA exam. I would imagine that we've got 600-700 people and students in Wisconsin who take the law school admissions test. That isn't one of them that is listed here as a measure. Why is that?
We can look into the feasibility of adding that measure or that indicator to this. Frankly, we have never even thought about it.
You can tell the truth what you think about lawyers.
Well, I just thought maybe it wasn't in there because they didn't do so well.
We'll check into the feasibility.
They obviously can't do anything else.
I mean, it has 600 people who took the medical college admissions test. I'm positive there are at least 600 people and students in Wisconsin who took the LSAT.
We'll check into it.
Thanks.
All right, well, with that, thank you very much for that conversation and interchange and remarks, and we will continue to improve this piece, and we'll be talking more about its results around diversity in particular in the next few months with you. A few more items of note for you today before I conclude my report. Since we met last in March, I have been making the rounds in the state capitol to meet with key legislators, in particular legislative leadership, members of the Assembly and Senate Higher Ed Committees and the Joint Finance Committee. Region President Walsh and Region Vice President Bradley have been very active under the Capitol Dome, as well as have many of our chancellors in this season, where we're trying to get our message out to legislators. I think David mentioned that he and I met with Representative Scott Souter and Senator Jim Sullivan. Regent Bradley has been to see Senators Jeff Plaley and Julie Lassa. I also met individually with Representatives Robin Voss and Steve Castell and Joan Balwig and Mark Pocan and Dan Meyer, as well as Senators Hansen and Lena Taylor. In the coming weeks, we intend to meet with more of the legislators, such as Representative Kitty Rhodes, who's the co-chair of the Joint Committee on Finance, and Representative Jeff Stone and Senator Alberta Darling are on my list. They're both members of Joint Finance as well as Senator Kathleen Vineout, who's the chair of the Senate Committee on Ag and Higher Education. These capital visits really are an opportunity for us to follow up on our Joint Finance Committee testimony that President Walsh and I made on March 22nd. I talked a lot about the growth agenda in the broad way that I talk about it. Regent Walsh outlined there all our efforts toward accountability and efficiency. We provided some follow-up to members of Joint Finance who asked us for various items, and I think, as David said, it was a very good dialogue, positive for the great majority of it, I'd say, and continues to be positive in the follow-up conversations we're having with members of Joint Finance. When we met with Representative Souter, we were able to talk with him a bit about instances in which we've lost faculty to other institutions, largely because we were not able to pay the same level of salary of competitive compensation. Regent Walsh mentioned our meeting with Senator Sullivan. I won't reiterate that. By the end of this month, the end of April, if plans hold, and I hope they will, we will have met with every member of the Joint Finance Committee and every member of the leadership in both houses. And next week, looking forward more immediately, we'll be busy at the Capitol as well. On Wednesday morning, I'll testify before the Joint Audit Committee to follow up on the state review of economic development programs sponsored by the state, and I think I'll be able to provide there some very positive information about the UW's role in helping to develop a kind of one-stop shop website for statewide economic development programs. That was the burden of the LAB audit of the state economic development programs, is there was a lot out there and the right hand didn't always know what the left was doing, so we have stepped up to try to help in that regard by pulling together with the good offices of Extension, mainly working on this, a website that will pull all those programs together for people to see and compare. Our posters in the Rotunda event will take place at noon next Wednesday as well. More about that in a minute. At 1 p.m. on Wednesday, the Joint Finance Committee is scheduled to hold a public hearing on the 07-09 capital budget. David Miller mentioned that, so he and others will be there to make our case on the capital side. And then on Thursday, the 19th, I'll present information about the growth agenda for Wisconsin to the Senate Agriculture and Higher Education Committee. And I'm grateful to Senator Vineout, who's the chair there, for pulling that hearing together at a good time. Members of that committee include Senators Lassa and Plailey, Senators Kapanke and Harsdorf, all of whom have endorsed the growth agenda. So we will be blanketing the Capitol over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully wish us good luck and success. Students are also sharing information with legislators. We're not the only ones down at the Capitol. And there's a new student organization I wanted to make you aware of called the UW System Alliance. This group was formed by student governments from 6 of our campuses: UW Green Bay, Platteville, River Falls, Stout, Superior, and Whitewater. And these campuses are no longer part of the United Council of UW Students. They say they formed the alliance as an organized way to make their voices heard. The group intends to communicate directly, they tell me, with other UW campuses, with representatives of the UW system, with board members, and with legislators. The alliance members tell me they do welcome participation of campuses in their activities that are also members of United Council. Last week, at their request, I met with the elected heads of student government from UW Green Bay and UW Platteville, representing all the campuses in this new alliance. We talked about how they might best communicate with us and with you, and I assured them that you and I are interested in hearing from students on every campus and that we'll be pleased to work with both the alliance and with United Council. I received a letter from UW-Eau Claire University Senate this week in support of the growth agenda, and Eau Claire has I guess, Brian, we could call it a unicameral governance organization, so that the faculty and academic staff are part of one Senate there, and they endorsed the agenda and particularly noted our plans to fund the NanoSTEM initiative of UW-Eau Claire and UW-Stout, working with Chippewa Valley Tech, as well as the programs to support teacher and nursing education. Late last week, Chancellor Santiago and I met with editorial board at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. We talked with the editors about our growth agenda, and in particular UW-Milwaukee's plan plans to expand its research enterprise. And then on Monday of this week, I hope you saw that that paper ran an editorial praising these plans for their potential to grow the number of advanced degrees in Wisconsin and to boost regional economic development. That editorial was very clear in encouraging the legislature to find ways to fund this important agenda. I also met with news media during my trip to Superior last month, and it wasn't easy getting there because of some heavy ground fog at the Duluth airport, but we did finally make it. And that visit resulted in a couple of very good news articles. Chancellor Erlenbach and I met with editorial and support folks from the Superior Daily Telegram, and that paper, after the meetings, editorialized that lawmakers should support UW initiatives that will, quote, propel Wisconsin to be the best it can be, unquote. The paper said, quote, better educated residents will earn more money, attract more jobs to the state, and create a business climate that more than offsets taxpayer costs, unquote. Now, I could not have said that better myself. So my thanks to Chancellor Erlenbach for the invitation to visit with him and his colleagues at Superior. He, I think, had to leave early, so I don't think he's here, right? And for arranging meetings there with the governance groups on campus, faculty and staff and students, with the Chamber of Commerce, and with the early in the morning Sunrise Rotary Club. As further background, there are facts, like single sheets on each of the growth agenda items in your red folder for this morning's meeting, and we're using these fact sheets to explain to editorial boards and legislative leaders what we're doing in the growth agenda. Just last week, some news from River Falls, which launched the St. Croix Institute for Sustainable Community Development. And I know that Chancellor Pruitt was up at River Falls recently because Chancellor Pruitt, Regent Pruitt, was up at River Falls recently. And we knew he was there because it snowed. And it snows every time he goes up. But the St. Croix Institute for Sustainable Community Development is a kind of think tank that will address a range of issues related to economic, environmental, and social sustainability in that part of the state on both local and global scales. It will be, in its aspirations, a central contact for local government and nonprofit organizations in Pierce, Polk, and St. Croix counties that are managing the booming growth that is largely driven by immigrants from the Twin Cities, shall we call them. It will also engage students and faculty in service learning projects to help communities identify problems and implement solutions. And the Institute will guide UW River Falls as it looks to alternative energy sources and become an energy-neutral campus. Chancellor Betts says the campus launched the Institute to be a regional partner in finding sustainability solutions, and will strive to make it serve as a model for other regions around the state and the nation. So congratulations to River Falls, your Chancellor, and Charles for doing that. On a related note, the Learning Resources Network, an international association in lifelong learning, has recognized the Synergy Initiative for West Central Wisconsin with an award for excellence in community service. The Synergy Initiative brings together representatives of business, industry, education, and government for collaborations that promote sustainable economic development. Partners in Synergy include UW-Eau Claire, River Falls, Stout, and Barron County. So congratulations to those campuses on that award. Some sad news from UW-La Crosse. Maurice Graff, a longtime faculty member and leader at UW-La Crosse, passed away last month at the age of 99. Dr. Graff joined UW-La Crosse in 1941. He was a professor in economics and political science. Between 1941 and when he retired in 1972, Dr. Graff also served as student personnel director, admissions director, summer session director, and dean and academic affairs vice president. Chancellor Joe Gow reminded his colleagues last week that Dr. Graff had called UW-La Crosse, quote, a very special campus. The campus has for 30 years now honored Dr. Graff through the Maurice O. Graff Distinguished Alumni Award, and his legacy is also remembered at UW-La Crosse in the form of Graff Main Hall, the oldest building on our La Crosse campus. A word about all the you've been reading and hearing about regarding student loans. As you know, the New York State Attorney General, Andrew Cuomo, has been actively investigating potential conflicts of interest and potential illegal conduct in the student loan industry. Discussions about that in the press have brought to my attention the lack of a system-wide policy regarding campus relationships with lending institutions. So I think I hope you all saw the copy of the email that I copied the board on going to the campuses that I'm asking our financial aid directors to undertake the work of helping us to develop an inventory of current practices, and we've got a lot of that information in already, and a system-level policy regarding relationships with lending institutions. I've sent to all of our institutions the New York student college loan, or rather college loan of conduct statement that's been distributed as part of this national discourse, and I think that's a good statement that I hope can serve as a basis for developing a system policy in the UW. So I'm asking the working group to provide their recommendations on a UW system code of conduct to me by the end of April. We'll have several staff from the system office working with the financial aid directors, and I've asked Executive Senior Vice President Don Mash to head up that group. And after we get a new policy in place in that regard, we'll ask the chancellors to ensure that their campus practices indeed comply with it. We want, as always here, to be sure that our efforts continue to be in the best interests of our students. We will do that, and I will come back to this board next month, at our meeting next month, and provide you with the fruits of our labor. I want to say that I think we all need to recognize that students and families are challenged these days to pay the cost of college. It's a constant topic of this board, as a matter of fact. And we all want the university to assist our students and families in this regard. That is, what should not happen as a result of this investigation is that we back away from helping our families and students to figure out how they can financially come and study and graduate with us and go on to be productive citizens. But we want to provide them with that advice in ways that are fully transparent, in ways that are completely above board, and that will be the intent of the policy that I'll come back to you with next month. So let me close today by inviting you all to join us for the Posters in the Rotunda and Spirit Day events, which will be held next Wednesday in Madison. We'll have about 100 students from every campus in the system doing a Posters in the Rotunda session, which will showcase the value of undergraduate research from around our campuses. It's a good event to attend, I find, just because it's so humbling. Because most of the research projects that our sophomores and juniors are working on, I can barely understand, and so it's good for Regents to have that experience as well. It's also a great chance for legislators to meet students from their districts and to learn more about the importance of supporting the undergraduate research opportunities that we offer our undergrads and the university in general. Lieutenant Governor Lawton will join Regent Walsh and me in making a few remarks, and we'll hear also from Lori Scardino, more importantly, I think, than hearing from us. She's a non-traditional student at UW-Eau Claire, an outstanding undergraduate researcher who earned a place on this year's USA Today College Academic First Team, making Chancellor Levin Stankiewicz and his colleagues at UW-Eau Claire very proud. So we'll look forward to hear from Lori and to have the legislators and others in that event hear from her as well. So you received an email about this. If you have questions about how you want to participate, I know several of you have indicated you will be there. We can talk about that. At the end of the day, we will have a reception where we've invited the legislature to come and join us, which will feature a jazz performance from UW-Eau Claire musicians, and we'll be joined by a very special guest at that reception, Badger football coach Brett Bielema. Even though we do recognize that Regent Walsh is a huge attraction at these events in the Capitol, we thought we might get a few extra legislators if Coach Bielema came along. Finally today, although I don't believe she's with us, I wanted to, is Martha Saunders in the room? She was here yesterday, but I don't think she's here today. I did want to offer an advance farewell to her. You know that she'll be leaving, very sadly for us, leaving UW-Whitewater to go back to her home state and to her alma mater at the University of Southern Mississippi as the president there. Wisconsin's loss is definitely Mississippi's gain. Martha's been a great chancellor in the short time she's been with us, an astute and energetic leader there, and a great ambassador for her campus and the entire UW system. I think you know that we did have a clause in her contract, which she has now sadly invoked, that indicated that she could take a job in another state only if the other Brett Favre, lived there. So she's now going to do that. So we thank her for her service. Let's give her a round of applause at Ascension. Regent Bradley.
I just want to point out that I spoke to Martha yesterday, and not only is she going back to her alma mater, but she's going back to the city where she attended high school. So she was back there, and she talked to the leaders of the business community and other people who had come back to their hometown, and they made a solemn pact, and that is, what happened at Hattiesburg High School stays at Hattiesburg High School.
Thank you all, Regent Bradley. That's the end of my report, President Walsh.
The report of the Education Committee, Regent Davis.
Pleased to report the summary from yesterday's meeting of the Education Committee, one of our shortest, record shortest in my tenure, so we were quite pleased in that respect. We had several program authorizations. We consider 3 to be specific. The first one was the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry. That degree was, or authorization request was presented by Provost Virginia Helm, who introduced a very impressive team from UWSP. It was noted that Wisconsin is among the nation's top 5 regions for biotechnology growth. Research hospitals and biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies are in need of trained biochemists. UW-Stevens Point anticipates that the new program will draw 90 to 100 biochemistry majors. The program requires no new faculty or facilities, since it will be jointly administered by the existing departments of biology and chemistry. The second program before us was the BA in First Nation Studies at UW Green Bay. Provost Hammersmith introduced Lisa Pupar, Associate Professor of Humanistic Studies and Chairperson of the First Nations Studies at UW Green Bay. Really impressive woman. Professor Pupar outlined the proposed programs as one that will assist the state in meeting Act 31 requirements, which essentially call for K-12 education to include the study of Wisconsin's first inhabitants. The curriculum includes a 12-credit concentration in elder knowledge, epistemology, I think that's right, or the Oneida language. I should have said that one first. Okay, so the program will be delivered in collaboration with UW-Fond du Lac and the College of Menominee Nation. Discussion followed regarding the potential of the major to attract more American Indian students and the options available for graduates of this program. The third program before the Education Committee was the Bachelor of Applied Studies in Leadership and Organizational Studies at UW-Oshkosh, which was mentioned by the New North panel. Associate Vice President Ron Singer provided background on the kind of program this new Bachelor of Applied Studies represents. Ron Singer noted that President Riley's growth agenda is designed to address the challenge of increasing the number and percentage of baccalaureate degree holders in Wisconsin. To address this need, the Colby report called for the development of degree completion programs targeted to working adult students who hold an associate degree and are in need of a baccalaureate degree to assist in their degree progression. Colby funds provided in the 2005-07 biennial budget funded the development of Bachelors of Applied Studies degree programs proposed collaboratively by UW-Oshkosh and UW Green Bay. This degree program presented today by UW-Oshkosh is a result of this initiative, and we can expect UWGB to offer proposal likely at our next meeting in May. Provost Lane Ernst then introduced Charles Hill, Professor of English and Chair of Curriculum Planning Committee for the Leadership and Organizational Studies program. Also present were a number of other persons, including Marcia Rossiter, Assistant Vice Chancellor, Division of Lifelong Learning and Community Engagement, and Lynn Brandt, Coordinator of Student Services Center for New Learning. Professor Hill noted that the purpose of the Bachelor of Applied Studies in Leadership and Organizational studies at UWO was to equip graduates with the knowledge and skills required for supervisory and leadership positions in public and private organizations. The program will provide seamless transition into the baccalaureate level education for technical college graduates. The curriculum focuses on communication, organizational administration, leadership, appreciating diverse perspectives, understanding of the research process, critical thinking, and self-directed lifelong learning. The program was established in collaboration with Fox Valley Technical College and UW-Fox Valley, and joint recruitment and promotion will occur with UW-Green Bay. Discussion followed regarding the acceptance of credits from the technical colleges, the availability of this program to students without associate degrees, and funding for the program. So we had a vigorous conversation in that regard. We then moved on to the next item on the agenda, which was a presentation by our host campus entitled UW-Oshkosh's Role in Northeastern Wisconsin's Growth Agenda, Aligning Academic Program Menu with Current and Future Regional Needs. Deans and students from the 4 UW-Oshkosh colleges discussed how collaborations, a variety of collaborations, have improved the education of students and the experience that they have, and provided needed expertise and resources to regional businesses and communities. The campus has also increased programs and services for working adults through collaborations with 4 UW colleges, 4 technical colleges, and employers such as Mercury Marine and Miles Kimball. Next on the agenda was the approval of requests to trustees of the William F. Vilas Trust Estate for support of scholarships, fellowships, professorships, and special programs in arts and humanities, social sciences, and music. Each year, the UW system, UW-Madison in particular, is the beneficiary of incredible generosity from the William F. Vilas Trust Estate. The Vilas Trust comes before the Education Committee each April and May in a 2-part process. Prior to the April meeting, the trustees of the William F. Vilas Trust Estate formally request that the president of the UW system ask the chancellors of UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee to determine the amounts they will request for funding. At the April meeting, the Regents formally approved the request, which is spelled out in the executive summary and supporting documents. Following approval of Resolution 1-1D-1, President Riley will then send a formal request to the Vilas trustees, who will then determine the amount of income that will be available for the various awards. The value of the proffer will be reported to the board at its meeting in May, whereupon the Education Committee will again act to accept the proffer. The Vilas Trust designates funding for undergraduates and graduate scholarships and fellowships from which thousands of students on the Madison campus have benefited over the years. The Trust funds named professorships and provides additional research funding for faculty and students. The Trust also funds several requests from UW-Milwaukee, including an annual music request and the funding of a Vilas research professor in the Department of English. The Vilas funding goes to critically deserving but often neglected and underfunded areas, especially in music and the arts. The UW system is extremely grateful for this extraordinary support. Next on the agenda was the annual report as required by the Wisconsin statutes on the 2005-06 Minority and Disadvantaged Student Programs. The M&D report, as it is fondly known, is a statutorily required report presenting information on the pre-college initiatives and activities expenditures, and not really substance, for multicultural and economic development, economically disadvantaged student programs and student financial assistance data. The committee's acceptance of the report is required before it may be submitted to the chief clerks of each house of the legislature. So some of the highlights include that a total of $45.8 million in expenditures were made from all funds, that UW institutions continue to contribute significantly through increases in external funding, raised and reallocations of existing institutional funds, which we heard earlier about, for M&D programs. $27.1 million were raised by institutions from extramural and non-government sources compared to $24.1 million the previous year, a $3 million increase, and an almost 200% increase from 1998. The state created an appropriation to provide funding for M&D programs. Out of this appropriation referred to as Fund 402, $7.9 million was expended in 0506. 62% of the funds were spent on retention, 17% on recruitment, and 21% on pre-college. Associate Vice President Ron Singer noted that there are larger issues concerning the nature of our retention efforts and academic support services, which will be addressed in the next coming months. So then finally, Associate Vice President Ron Singer, acting on behalf of Rebecca Martin, shared with our committee some updates on the admissions process based on the committee's discussion in February. You may recall that Regents were concerned that while socioeconomic factors were to be considered in the admissions process, information on socioeconomic status was not explicitly included in the application process. And Ron noted the various ways that the socioeconomic status data will be included in the application or admissions process. Ron also noted that the annual report on sexual assault and sexual harassment had been sent to the Regents under separate cover, and that this report includes institutional summaries of activities to disseminate information to students to prevent sexual assaults and harassment. It is a report that we are required to prepare for the legislature and is financial, not programmatic in nature. Finally, Ron provided a brief review of progress on the goals that we set as a committee last October. There's been excellent progress on the WTCS issues on diversity, charter schools, and admissions policy. Work is still being done on climate study, inclusivity initiative, the diversity award, rethinking accountability, and pre-college program assessment, all to come. Regent Loftus noted the importance of gathering information on demographics and retention of veterans with their increased enrollment. Interim Associate Vice President Sharon Wilhelm responded by noting that OPAR is looking at systematically tracking veterans through the CDR, and then that will allow for such information to be tracked. So, Mr. President, I have then 5 resolutions approved yesterday by the Education Committee that I now present as consent agenda items for your action, for our action. Resolution 11B(1), authorizing the implementation of the BS in biochemistry at UW-Stevens Point. Resolution 11B(2), authorizing the implementation of the BA in First Nation Studies at UW-Green Bay. Resolution 11B(3), authorizing the implementation of the Bachelor of Applied Studies at UW-Oshkosh. Resolution 11D(1), approving the request to the Vilas Trust, and Resolution 11D(2), accepting the 2005-06 Minority and Disadvantaged Student Programs Annual Report for submission to the Chief Clerks of both houses of the Legislature.
Is there a second to the motion? Is there a request to remove any item from the consent agenda? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. President, let me conclude my report by noting that the Education Committee meeting adjourned at 4:30, just in time for the reception that we were all glad to be at.
I think it was in time for the fire alarm.
Right, that too.
Report of the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee, Regent Pruitt. Our Chancellor, what is your name?
Thank you, Mr. President. We began our session by hearing a presentation from UW-Oshkosh on the UW-Oshkosh's role in Northeast Wisconsin's growth agenda, diversifying our revenue sources. Tom Sonnleitner, the Vice Chancellor for Administrative Services at UW-Oshkosh, was joined by Art Rathjen, the President of the UW-Oshkosh Foundation, and they highlighted ways in which UW-Oshkosh is seeking out new revenue streams to support the growth agenda and current programs that are helping to meet the pressing needs of the region. As has been alluded to, UW-Oshkosh has begun its first major capital campaign with the goal to raise $24 million, of which $8 million will go towards a new academic building. Mr. President, I'd like to report that Regent Smith was so moved by this presentation that he pledged his entire annual salary as a member of the Board of Regents to the UWO Pride and Promise campaign. Unfortunately, Chancellor Wells, this is the 4th time Regent Smith has pledged his entire salary to a cause, so good luck in collecting that.
Be similar.
That's right. We then moved to an evaluation of targeted tuition programs and extension of the Return to Wisconsin program. Lynn Paulson, Assistant Vice President for Budget and Planning, discussed the Return to Wisconsin program, the Tri-State Initiative at UW-Platteville, and the Midwest Student Exchange Program. He noted that the board approved these programs in response to a significant drop in non-resident enrollments after UW system non-resident tuition increases outpaced that of peer institutions. This is obviously an issue that this board has heard a lot about over the last couple of years. Once again, it's important to underscore that no Wisconsin student is displaced as a result of these programs, and that there is substantial excess revenue over costs that are utilized to actually support the education of additional students, resident students from Wisconsin. The resolution to continue the Return to Wisconsin program will be presented at the end of this report. Vice President Debbie Durkin indicated as we move to a discussion on the review and approval of selected differential tuition programs, Vice President Durkin indicated that work is underway to look at the UW system's tuition policy overall, including the role of differential tuition within that. Other issues to be reviewed include stratification among institutions, low-cost options, per-credit tuition, and program differentials. On behalf of, I think, the entire board, our committee endorsed this review as both needed and very important as part of our overall strategic planning process, looking at broadly at tuition policy and specifically within that review, looking at differential tuition. There are 3 proposals for differential tuition which are being advanced to the whole board today. One at Oshkosh, one at River Falls, and one with business school at or business majors at UW-Madison. I think we considered these proposals with the idea that they needed to meet 3 standards. One, that there was a demonstrated need for the programs that were being supported by the differential tuition. And I think you saw in your materials, and we certainly heard in our presentation, that at UW-Oshkosh and UW-River Falls, these programs are devoted to improving the undergraduate experience through a range of ways, funding for advising, funding for travel, internships, the library, undergraduate research, and a range of other programs that students are calling for. At UW-Madison with the business program, clearly directed toward attracting and retaining quality faculty in an increasingly competitive environment, as well as advising and other things. Second, that these differential programs related to that need to directly benefit students and are targeted to specific needs that students are identifying. And third, that they need to involve students in the decision-making process. And in all 3 of these cases, I think the campuses reported substantial student involvement and student endorsement of these suggestions. Obviously, there's some critique of those who suggest that some of these funds are substituting or replacing GPR funding from the state, and that is absolutely true. And I think we all realize that a decade-plus long period of declines in GPR support has caused campuses to need to deal with that. But they certainly all reflect some very serious and real needs and desires on the part of the campuses. And so we are bringing forth all 3 of those for your review and approval. The first, Oshkosh, Petra Roter, the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, discussed the $55 per semester differential tuition for UW-Oshkosh students and asked the committee to approve the resolution extending this program. She noted that the resolution requires an annual review of the fee by a committee made up of 10 students appointed by the Oshkosh Student Association and 1 advisor. There is no expectation of increasing the amount of this differential tuition for the foreseeable future. We then heard from UW-River Falls. Don Betts, the Chancellor, Joe Eggers, the Student Senate President, discussed their differential tuition proposal. Chancellor Betts and Mr. Eggers, along with UW-River Falls students Jim Darling and Natalie Hagberg, asked the committee to approve a new $36 per semester differential tuition for all undergraduate students at UW-River Falls. Students focused on 3 areas of needed funding: expanded library hours, increased undergraduate research, and expanded testing centers. The rate would be fixed for a 4-year period, after which it would be reviewed for reauthorization by a campus oversight committee made up of equal representation of students, faculty, and staff. And finally, the UW-Madison School of Business proposal, Michael Knetter, the Dean of the School of Business at UW-Madison, Eric Eichhoff, the UW-Madison sophomore and president of Future Business Leaders of America, and you can tell this guy's going to be a future business leader, and pre-business student, discussed and asked the committee to approve a new differential tuition for UW-Madison undergraduates in the Bachelor of Business Administration major and Certificate in Business program. The differential would be $500 per semester for those in the BBA major and $150 per year for those in the certificate program. The differential is needed, as I mentioned earlier, to maintain the high quality of the program. Also attending and seeking approval of this proposal were Kim Hughes from UW-Madison's senior marketing major and president of the Student Marketing Association, and Jesse Siegelman, a junior at Madison and a real estate major and past president of the Undergraduate Business Leadership Council. Dean Knetter stated an important component of the differential is to provide an increase in financial aid. He expects the business school to also be able to raise additional funds for scholarships, and he assured us that the scholarships and additional financial aid would be targeted reflecting the priority of this board to those in low and moderate income quintiles to do whatever we can to ensure that the increase in tuition will not discourage students from participating in this program. These resolutions related to all these will be offered at the end of this report as part of the consent agenda, and I turn to Regent Burmester.
Thank you, Regent Pruitt. In accordance with a new process endorsed by the board last February, President Riley conducts reviews of individual academic leaders' salaries to determine whether there is a need for an adjustment to remain competitive or to correct salary inequities. After President Riley's presentation, the committee discussed and approved salary adjustments for the chancellors at UW colleges, UW Extension, the UW-Eau Claire, and a provost at UW-Whitewater under this process to address recruitment and retention. Next, we moved to the Trust Fund's Annual Endowment Peer Benchmarking Report. Assistant Trust Officer Doug Herr noted that returns on UW Trust Funds exceed those of our peers in the 1, 3, 5, and 10-year periods ending in June 30th of 2006. So we've improved our performance over recent years due to increased exposure to equity and alternative assets. The cost of managing our investments is also lower than our peers in this report. Director Herr mentioned that while we follow a typical methodology in establishing spending rate, our 4% rate is somewhat more conservative than the peer average of 4.7%. It was also very interesting to all of the committee members that only 12 to 18% of the peers in this report have socially responsible investing practices. And we believe that that's something that we should be very proud of, that we engage in socially responsible investment practice. Next, Tom Reinders, investment portfolio analyst, noted that the dominant social issues for the 2007 season were the environment and sustainability, corporate political contributions, equal employment opportunity, global labor practices, and animal welfare. Trust funds investment managers will be directed to vote in the affirmative for most of the proxies related to all of these issues, as they will fall under the 20 social issues or themes that the committee has already approved for active voting. Now, the one new issue that is on this is related to corporate reporting on political contributions. Next, Assistant Trust Officer Herr stated that individual bequests of $50,000 or more are brought to the board so that they can, via resolution, be formally accepted and recognized. Bequests recognized for this period were the Irene Marsh Trust, which was over $100,000, the Dan P. Murphy Estate, which was $75,000, the Bennett Tollefson Estate at $50,000, the Frank Gabriel Estate of $1 million, the Jan Horton Seneschal Trust, nearly $600,000,
the Marion Peabody and Carrie Peabody Family Trusts, approximately $150,000, and proceeds from the sale of the Ann Carroll Hansen Forest of $2.2 million. We're very grateful to all of these donors for their generosity and their belief in the UW system. Next, Vince Sweeney, Senior Associate Athletic Director for External Relations of the UW-Madison, asked for the committee's approval of changes in contract language and extension of the Intercollegiate Athletics Agreement with Learfield Communications. UW-Madison officials believe that this is going to be one of the best contracts in the country. It provides a minimum guarantee, which is significantly higher than the current contract, and it also protects the university if gross revenues significantly decline over the life of the contract. General Counsel Pat Brady then discussed proposed changes to the UW system records management policy. These new policies are meant to enhance the organization, management, retention, and disposal of public records created by the university through clearly stated retention guidelines and processes for archiving. We then move to General Counsel Pat Brady discussing proposed changes to the numbering and the organization of the region policy documents. The proposed changes will move away from a numbering scheme based on the year a particular policy was initially approved toward one based more on topical areas. It's believed, I think common sense, that this new approach is going to provide a more coherent organization of region policies and facilitate easier access to related policies.
Finally, the committee heard a report from Vice President Durkin, who updated us on the Legislative Audit Bureau's A133 federally mandated audit of federal funds. She noted that the university question costs were extremely low, only $12,802 of the $1.2 billion of federally funded expenditures, which is at, for those of you, it's those statisticians in the audience, about 0.001%, or 1,000th of a percent. So pretty close. Vice President Durkin expects the statewide information technology, the so-called IT audit, to be released in the middle of the month. The Business, Finance, and Audit Committee will look at that audit, those audit results, and along with our own system audit that was done and completed last month, we'll take the two of those together and come back to this board with recommendations. Likely at the May meeting, we will also be looking at the audit on textbook costs and a couple other audits, but which were deferred until all of the members of our committee could return and be present for them. The Special Regent Committee on the response to the LAB audit on personnel policies and practices met last week, and I know there are a couple of members of the board who are part of that. We heard a brief report on it. Main issues were the recommendations of the Fringe Benefit Advisory Committee and colleague coverage. A report will be on the May agenda. Utility projections are through March continue to show a surplus. As a result of all this talking, the Business, Finance, and Audit Committee unanimously approved the following resolutions, which I now present as consent items. I move the adoption of, I guess I will read these all. Resolution 1.2C, extension of the Return to Wisconsin Tuition Program. 1.2D1, UW-Oshkosh reaffirmation and extension of campus-wide differential tuition. 1.2D2, the UW River Falls undergraduate differential tuition. 1.2D3, the UW-Madison School of Business undergraduate differential tuition. 1.2E, consideration of salary adjustments for senior academic leaders to address recruitment and retention challenges for chancellors at UW-Eau Claire and UW Colleges, UW Extension, and the provost at UW-Whitewater. Resolution 1.2F2, voting of 2007 non-routine proxy proposals. Resolution 1.2F3, the UW System Trust Funds acceptance of bequest. Resolution 1.2G1, the UW-Madison Division of Intercollegiate Athletics contract with Learfield Communications. Resolution 1.2G2, the University of Wisconsin System Public Records Management Policy. And Resolution 1.2G3, the University of Wisconsin System new format for the Regent policy documents.
Second to the motion.
Second.
We have a second. Is there a request to remove any item from the consent agenda?
1, 2, 3.
Is that the Madison Business School?
Any other requests?
I would like to remove the other two differential tuition resolutions.
That would be
D1 and D2.
D1 and D2, Mr. President.
So we have a request to remove 1.2D1, 1.2D2, and 1.2D3. Any other requests? Seeing none on the remaining portion of the consent agenda, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we now have in front of us 1.2D1.
My request is based almost entirely on the issue of the third criterion that that Chairman Pruitt indicated that were used as to evaluate these proposals. That is, involvement of students in decision making. And I'm curious. I think in any decision that we make to increase student tuition, I think we have to be very careful to examine the student involvement in that decision. And I'm curious to know whether there was a process used in any one of these three or in all of these three to involve students, and how that actually worked. Was there a vote? Was there some kind of governance organization that was involved? How did the student involvement show itself?
I will briefly comment and then encourage others to. Oh, I mean, maybe let me just defer. I think in general terms, Regent Bartel, and then I'll defer. Without exception, each of these had what I would just describe globally as governing student bodies involvement in some fairly significant, and affirmative ways of endorsing this. But let me defer to the.
Would you please identify yourself? Go ahead.
The differential tuition that we submitted is actually a reauthorization of something that was submitted back in 2002 to the Board of Regents and was approved at that point. The differential tuition at UW-Oshkosh is actually a student initiative and is part of what is called our student or Oshkosh Development Compact, which we developed both for students and for faculty. And the students noted that there were certain areas in which we needed to enhance programs or develop programs that would aid success and retention of students. And they pretty much determined what those areas were in conjunction with and in collaboration with the compact. The first go around, it actually came from the students and the Student Association. This go around, actually the differential tuition was sunsetted. It was more of a pilot program, and for the past year and a half, we've been in a reauthorization period where we've done comprehensive surveys. We have gone ahead and held a number of forums, meeting with constituency groups. The comprehensive survey and assessment and evaluation was compiled, put together, placed on the websites. More student input was collected, and then it actually went to the Student Association and was voted unanimously at the Assembly and also at the Senate. So students have been involved in the process. We also have an agreement with the students that this is their program. There are 11 members of the Differential Tuition Finance Committee that reviews the proposals and the budget requests and also assesses the programs on a regular basis. So there's lots of accountability. Of the 11 people that are on that committee, 10 are students, and they're all selected from and approved by OSA, which is our Student Association. The only person that is on that committee that is not a student is myself. I am service the advisor, and I'm a non-voting member. So you can see that students are pretty much involved in that. There's also another fail-safe in this, and that is that if at any time the students want to change, either increase or decrease the level of funding for the differential tuition, they have to go through the Finance Committee, make a proposal to the OSA, and OSA has to pass it by a 2/3 vote. So it's very student-driven.
Students that we had breakfast with at my table, all five, other than talking about whether there was going to be beer in the union or not, this was the second most talked about subject. And they said that there was extensive, and they kind of rolled their eyes, and I said, was there much involvement by the students? They said, yes, there was many meetings, much discussion. That was a question I wanted answered too, Jeff, so I was assured that there was a lot of student involvement in it.
Yeah, it was pretty well vetted.
Yeah. We've got Charles Hurt from River Falls. And
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The River Falls initiative was predominantly student-driven. And by that, I mean not only did students vote on this measure, but they were the ones that decided on this measure and decided on the elements within the measure. And with us is Joe Eggers, who is president of the Student Association at River Falls. And Joe, you certainly know more about this than I do, so with the president's permission,
yes,
President Eggers.
Yeah, our student government played a large role in the implementation of our differential tuition policy on campus. It began last semester with the discussions and formation of a committee that was made up of faculty, academic staff, and students that filtered through a variety of proposals. I think there was somewhere around a dozen proposals that actually came before this committee, in which they went through and voted on, went by proposal by proposal, and came to a list of about half a dozen proposals that was then sent before our student senate, in which the student senate then went through every one of the proposals and finally got it down to the three that you see, or we passed as the final proposal, in which after that the whole proposal was voted on as a whole. Then we also established bylaws to govern ourselves with the differential tuition, establishing a committee which is made up of 8 students, 6 faculty members, and 6 academic staff members. We did implement a 4-year sunset policy in the differential tuition. So after 4 years, the whole policy will be reviewed. And every 3 years after that, it'll go through a review policy. And it's dominated by students. There's, this whole process was made up of students. The students are very involved. And at any point, if the way it'll work is this committee we established, a differential tuition committee, will go through any kind of proposals, any ideas for changes, evaluate programs. Any changes have to be passed through that committee, which it goes to our Facilities and Fees Committee, which has to pass then, and finally to our Student Senate. And if anywhere along that line, any of the proposals are voted down or do not pass, it doesn't go anywhere. So there's no way that it doesn't have student involvement, and it'll always have a heavy amount of student involvement and input on what goes on, which I think is really important.
Regent Bartow.
Does that mean that the tuition increase would go away after 4 years, unless it is continued?
Yeah, it has to be only passed again after 4 years.
Okay. I think I understood for Oshkosh that there was the possibility of reducing or eliminating the, is that right, Petra?
One of the things that we talked about was, or the students would like to see, is that if for some reason there was additional funding from the state or from the semester, we would look at reducing that depending upon what other dollars come into the system to help those kinds of programs.
That would be a student initiative?
Yes, students decided they wanted to decrease or increase, yeah.
Thank you. Frida, did you want to say something?
What I wanted to say is that we worked with the system very carefully with our campuses and city planning council to establish a process for different institutions. There is a process that talks about student involvement with the that process was built with the planning council and policy for we do not anyone in any district to you that has not received a student post or some kind of response on that, and we include the information on what that student's involvement has been. So far, no district has been brought to you that has not been included by the student document, and we have information on what that
Yeah, I guess maybe at the front end, because this is a school, college differential, not a campus-wide, the starting point in terms of how you gather student input is a little different. And so what you hear is exactly as Frida commented on. Once the idea was at least available, then the dean took some pains to talk to groups of students, both student organizations and, as you heard, listening sessions for students who were not included in student organizations or not in the business school altogether, to both hear their opinions about the differential as well as what they felt the biggest needs were. What you see as a result proposal is a reflection of that. So our business students are fairly astute in recognizing that what will impact their education is quality faculty. And I think you're all aware of the challenge that we face in getting and keeping quality faculty. I think you heard them both yesterday and again, Frida, recounting the various levels of discussion, approval, and so on for the proposal. So I think as it stands, we feel that we've done a pretty good job at getting those who are most likely to be impacted, getting their opinions, both current and likely future students.
Regent Rosenzweig.
Point of clarification from Regent Pruitt. You, I think, said that there's going to be a review of the whole policy surrounding differential tuition. And I was kind of curious, as this review comes forward, is there a target date for it to be revealed? And then what happens to the policy that's in place currently, perhaps?
I would defer to President Riley. Obviously, I think the approval of this, we are approving this on a going forward basis. So if we were to somehow at some point down the road alter it, that would require a separate action. These are in place and they will move forward. But President Riley, could you share the time frame?
Sure. Yeah, we have an initial framework that Vice President Durkin and Associate Vice President Frida Harris have pulled together as a discussion piece around where we're going with our overall tuition and financial aid policy. I mean, I think we need to look at those two together, include differential tuition, but also include the link to financial aid. We're in the process now of putting a working group together. I've talked with Regent Walsh and Regent Bradley. We will have some regents working with us on that committee. So we're hopeful, I think, summer, Deb, we could come back with the results of that thing. June, okay.
Chances for some discussions at the end of April, and so probably sometime it's late summer, I think.
I think it's timely now to.
We agree, and I think this is one of the, as Regent Pruitt said in his introduction, this is one of the big planks in the overall strategic planning look that we need to take. And so we will, as we have our Chancellor's retreat at the end of this month, this will be one of the topics certainly that we look at and talk to the Chancellors about, and then we'll get this work group together and come back to you initially in June with some thoughts and on through the summer probably as we firm it up.
I want the regents to know that the members of the committee, we spent a great deal of time on this and had a lot of very, very direct and difficult questions. And there were from the institution's students who presented to us as well. And I think the issue of the student involvement at both Oshkosh and River Falls was very, very apparent. And I think once that was put to rest and those questions were raised, just as you did, Jeff, we felt very good about that. The biggest issue that I had with the business school was the worry of the sticker shock, and I think everybody's nodding their heads, that it is such a large increase. And would that deter, especially the very students we're most concerned about, our low-income and our middle-income students? And so we spent a great deal of time talking about that. And the very fact, the dean was very persuasive, and we could see the commitment there with the 25% that would be set aside for financial aid. Darryl Bazell was there also, and talked of the commitment to that. The dean actually thought, he feels very strongly that this set-aside will help them even then in raising private funds for financial aid that would be able to augment that. And so I have to say that going into this discussion, very concerned about that issue and somewhat skeptical, I was very convinced by our leaders. And I feel that this is something that, again, until we've moved to this larger discussion, I do believe that it is necessary at this point in time for the business school.
Did you want to say something, Mr. President?
I did. Let me just add one thing, and then we'll go to that. I know there are more questions from Regents, but to follow up on what Regent Burmester said, on the sticker shock issue in particular, I thought that Vice Chancellor Bazell was persuasive in saying that, and maybe it was Dean Knetter as well, on that issue, these will be students who are already at Madison coming into making choices to come into the business program. And the dean and the vice chancellor indicated that Madison will work with students so they know what level of financial aid and scholarships are available. It's a little different from a sticker shock where the price is out there and families in high school and college, when they're making these, families and students in high school when they're making these choices, think, oh, we can't consider it because of that. We'll already have the advantage of having these students at UW-Madison, and we can work directly with them on on working around that sticker shock problem because of the financial aid and scholarship money that the school intends to put to help those students who need it.
All right. Regent Davis.
The reason that I asked for this, to take this out of consent, was because, and I really appreciate, Libby, what you said, because that helps me tremendously, and I actually wished I was there for this one. I do have a lot of respect for Dean Knetter, but I looked at this as, this is way out of order, too much. That was my reaction. I guess there's a couple questions I wonder if there was discussion around. One is, was there any, how does this fit with the tuition with their peers? Does this take Madison above, below, does it have any effect whatsoever among their peer business schools?
Well, this is undergraduate, and since we're already the second lowest in the Big Ten,
okay,
it probably doesn't move as much.
Okay.
But I would also say that, I mean, Frida will comment.
Chuck, thank you. We needed that.
You know, sometimes you just got to step back from the precipice, Mr. President.
In those areas, so they're not doing anything that's going to take them out of line with their peers.
And I think that's important on the issue of sticker shock. I understand what you're saying, but I think that helps. And also, does this review period make sense? Is this kind of normal? This, you know, the write-up says they'll review after the 2011-12 academic year. Is that, I can't count. What is that? 5 years? Right. So is that kind of normal, or is, I mean, I think Oshkosh was how many years? 4. 4? Oh, this is 4? I told you I couldn't count.
I think that has been the tradition. Traditionally, it has been a sort of a, I mean, the argument being that, you know, you need a period of time to sort of get a good look. I mean, I really appreciate your questions, Regent Davis. I mean, I think it's also important, as I know all do, to recognize what's driving this. I mean, we have talked about losing faculty and the ability to attract and retain faculty across the system.
Right.
You know, it is a challenge, perhaps beyond a challenge across the system. It is a crisis in the School of Business and in some of these targeted areas where, you know, faculty are receiving offers beyond any of our imagination, given the supply and demand that exists in this area. So.
Right. And then my last question is on the review process. Is it as extensive? Was your committee persuaded that it is as extensive as the initiation, I guess, or as the review that the other 2 campuses have described? Because I think I heard you say something, Chuck, about Frida said something about they weren't happy with the turnout. So I'm just wondering, you know, if you've got 10 students, you've got 100 students and only 10 show up, to me that's not necessarily reflective of the, you know, it's the age-old problem with voting and participation. But anyway, what's the review process?
Well, the review process, as I understand it, was that they had the Undergraduate Business Leadership Council represents 28 different business groups within the business school, reflecting 85% of the students. And they all took it back to their organizations and then came back and voted on the council, and I think the vote was 26-2. So,
okay. So they'll use that same process in reviewing.
That's my understanding.
4 or 5. Okay, thank you.
Regent McPike.
I guess I got some phone calls and some email on this business school thing, and I guess I still have a problem with how do we happen to put out the fire when the fire started before we even get to meet, and how does this get generated for media and whatever. And I understand media, but it's pretty hard to explain to people who have a problem with the university system, with tuition being high and whatever, and then all of a sudden we haven't even voted on anything in terms of the business school, and someone who's out there saying, well, we're going to add another $1,000 and not explain. And for those people who don't get into the university, don't understand that this is part of the students who are already there. And then we have to clean it up after our meeting to write an article in the paper or get someone to write an article in the paper that these are students already there that are paying the tuition. And that's very difficult for me to understand how we get caught into these kind of binds, because it is a bind.
It is. I agree, Regent McPike. And ironically, I think part of the reason the way we get into it is the student consultation process. That is, I think probably a lot of the people who were writing to you and calling you on this were people who'd read in the newspaper that Dean Thayer was holding these listening sessions. Now, we don't want to come to you until and unless he does that. But when he does that, there's a lot of press interest, and they go. I think some people from Madison said yesterday that, as a matter of fact, at some of those hearings, there were more reporters than there were students. The students weren't expressing outrage or concern. They had gone through this formal process with the 28 student organizations that were voted again, 26-2 to support it. But it's, I guess, my reaction is it's a problem of transparency, but it's part of the glory of being transparent and consultative in these kinds of situations.
Regent Seminis.
I'm going to direct this towards Frida and save Chuck from the fire on this. We're talking about allowing student input in here, and my question is, when we're talking about this, is who are we recognizing as the students who should be inputting it? Because here we have the River Falls Student Senate supporting it and taking the initiative. We have OSA, or the Oshkosh Student Association, here at UW-Oshkosh. But then all of a sudden, when we go to the Madison one, we have a group called, let me get to the exact name again, the Undergraduate Business Leadership Council, which is that a shared governance appointed group, or is it just a group of, or like was stated earlier, it's a group of individuals who represent the accounting club and the future business leaders of America, but yet it's not on our shared governance committees, which the jurisdiction for the student appointments on that isn't that within the Associated Students of Madison. So my concern is, are we going to get on a slippery slope where the group X supports this along with group A, B, C, and D, but then that's not the elected voice of the students, and even though student government participation rates may be at 12 to 15%, it's still, those students are taking the initiative to make sure that they're having elected officials and elected leaders, and we're sort of agreeing to pass one that doesn't have student governance support behind it, and that's where my concern is with the Madison proposal.
As part of the process for looking at differentials, we looked at two different times. We looked at the institutional differential, which will impact every student within the institution differently from the way we looked at programmatic differentials. And as I said, the process that we went through was a process that involved United Council working with us to come up with the process that was used to brought back then to the board. Now, for institutional initiatives, what we are looking for is the input from either the Student Government Association or through a student vote resolution, that type of thing, because again, it impacts all students. But with the programmatic differentials, what we were looking for was the input of the students who would be most impacted, which would be the students in that program, and that's how that was all directed. So UW-Madison followed the process that was developed with United Council, brought to the board, and is part of our differential tuition process.
I would just suggest, if I could, Chris, this is not unlike federalism. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are issues that relate to sort of states, that individual states make a decision on, and then there are issues that are sort of the province of the federal government. It's kind of, you almost can think about it in this regard. And in this case, the individual states are represented by the business students in their community, and in the case of River Falls and Oshkosh, which are sort of federal issues, the entire campus is covered.
Sorry. I understand that, but what I'm trying to look at, and I think maybe during the whole evaluation of differential tuition, is if it's going to be affecting students, I would like to understand that the whole broad student governance organizations are being consulted on these issues. And I know I was getting emails about the engineering differential tuition that proposal that was coming forward, but wasn't on this board's agenda for this month. And my concern is that students are electing leaders, and I understand how the colleges go, but that's not an individual governance council there. It's just a group, an advisory group of 28 different student organizations. And when we're looking at how are we going to be impacting it, and how are the students going to be involved in this process, also in seeing their tuition being passed, it goes back to where I've disagreed with Peggy on this in somewhat in the past. It's about what are the parents saying, who's being accountable for the segregated fee increases. And I sort of see the two in the same in some respects. And I think that it's appropriate that when we're moving forward in this process, and unfortunately I will not be here for that, but I look forward to reading about it and providing any input if needed, is saying that students who are their elected leaders need to have the accountability also on them, because we live in an awesome governance system within the UW system. I think we need to make sure that we're bringing everyone together, because it's teamwork, and it's not necessarily the college is going to be making decisions just for the college. We're looking at this as a whole, and I think why we care about this issue so much is because we're looking at it in the wider perspective and how it can impact future decisions.
Yes, Tim.
Sorry, Regent Shields.
Thank you, President Walsh.
Yeah, that's the first time I've done that.
I guess I guess I support Regent Seminis in this. I do know extensively about UW-Oshkosh's, like how they go about the DT here at UW. I haven't been directly involved with it, but I've seen it as far as OSA is concerned. River Falls, I'm pretty confident from what I'm hearing that the student participation is definitely there. My concern here with the UW-Madison proposal here is the same as Regent Seminis. I just kind of go about it a little bit differently. I did wonder why ASM wasn't consulted, in the sense that it does affect all the students, especially the ones coming in as freshmen. The ones who are going to be freshmen and who are going to think about going into the business school, that does impact them. And so it's not just the College of Business that needs to be consulted. It needs to be consulted on the whole campus, I believe. So as far as like this one, 1-2D3, I'm going to vote no. So, and that's all I have there, President Walsh.
Thank you, Tim. Frida?
I do think I should point out again, just for everybody's information, what Regent Smith has said, which is that the undergraduate business leadership group is composed of the leadership of the various organizations in the business school, representing about 85% of the students. So just for clarification, it's not a small group of listening sessions that I was talking about where there were only a few people to turn out, but it really was the vote of that organization. And I'm not disputing what you're saying, which is that you feel that the whole student body should have been involved in it. I'm simply saying that the campus did follow the process that was laid out and approved and brought to the board, which is that in programmatic differentials, it is the students who are most impacted by that differential who have to be brought in for consultation on that. And if that's something you want us to look at as we move forward in our discussion of differentials, certainly we should look at that, but understanding that the process that has been laid out and is part of the board's process was followed by the UW-Madison.
Frida, you've referred to them as the group most impacted, which suggests that somebody else is impacted. Isn't it the group that's only impacted?
Yes.
Not.
Which is the business school students. They're the only ones.
So it's not the most impacted, it's the only impacted.
Yes.
Okay.
This process, what year was that?
Well, on the pink sheets we got, they cite the policy from '96. Study of the UW system in the 21st century for each of these increases. I thought maybe that was the...
That was the study, Regent Spector, but then I think the actual policy was 99.
The policy of student involvement.
Chancellor Wells.
What I wanted to add to this, that all three of these are enhancements to things that are important to the students. And I'll give you the example of Oshkosh, and we agreed to do this. We agreed to hold harmless the budget support currently that we had was hugely inadequate for advising, career counseling, things of that sort. In fact, our process worked that the committee checks all that on us, and inadvertently, although some of the students wonder whether it was inadvertently, we had in going through our budget cutting exercise, remember this has been in play for 3 years, one of the units wanted to cut out a position that we had agreed to hold harmless, and the student group found it. And we, of course, because we agreed to hold that harmless, reinstated that particular position. So my last point is, it's time for the state to step up, because in the Oshkosh case, the Elmwood Commons project that you approved is $8.5 million to renovate it and find space, bring all these added positions, think about a dozen. We had like a 1 to 16 or 1,700 advisor to student ratio. Add up these additional positions to bring it down, at least now only 2 or 3 times higher than the national average. To bring that all together in this Commons Advisement Support Center. By the time that gets opened, the students will have already put in Oshkosh the $8 million in for the programming side. So it's just a little pitch, pardon me, we're in Oshkosh, for that building project.
Tom.
Thank you, President Walsh. I guess the thing that another thing that just popped in my mind too is that at UW-Oshkosh they actually went further and said this is how we're going to review it, this is how we're going to look at it in the future, and this is how students or whatever committee that decided or that will review, govern, whatnot over this. I'm not hearing that from Madison. So who is going to implement this, I guess? Who's going to oversee this?
Pat?
If I could comment briefly on that. Our expectation is, given the timeline imposed here, that we would, from a campus level, ask for the same, unless the policy changes in the meantime, for approval or reapproval. We would ask for the same kind of process, although then we'd have data in place to say how is this money used, what's the student perception on is that of value, are they getting value for the extra tuition that we're asking, have opinions changed about the importance of the kind of faculty that we think are important, have opinions changed about the ranking of your business school. Those kind of things that we're looking that this kind of funding will help maintain or improve. So I would expect we would see a similar process in terms of review in getting student input. Again, by that time, I'm sure there will be something more from system, and if that suggests that there's alternative ways to do this kind of review, we would, of course, abide by that. But I guess I understand some of the concerns about whether or not the rules in play provided to us by system are optimal. But to reinforce what Frida said, we tried as best we could to gather student input from those affected. Thought we did that successfully. And to us, the critical notion is that the students appreciate how important this is for their own education.
Regent Shields?
I kind of don't know if my question was answered. I guess I was trying to figure out, is this the group who initially, the 24 to 2, or are they the ones who are going to be the oversight? Okay. All right.
I could just add that University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has a $20 per credit tuition differential in our School of Business, which would equate to approximately $600 per year. Our students in the business school continue to work with the administration on the enhancements to their services from a faculty and advising and classroom experience perspective, and continue to be very pleased. Our enrollments continue to increase in business, and we haven't seen any adverse impact.
Regent Davis.
Just real quickly, I am going to support all three of these requests. I think this conversation has been very rich, and so I just want to make sure that's clear. However, I really urge that we do reconsider this policy that none of us here, well, maybe Libby did. I don't, were you here in '99? Well, anyway, that's a long time ago.
That's a personal question.
It was a long time ago, and I think we need to revisit the issue of whether the student input, as currently described in the policy that we approved, really continues to make sense. Because I think the objective of, qualitative student input is what we're talking about, and I really would like to see that. I don't know if that's part of the task force or if it's a separate thing.
That is a separate thing, and
Okay.
we can do that. We can bring it back.
Okay.
Question's been called. That's non-debatable. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Wait, what are we? Just never mind.
Try it again. The question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? With all due respect, not everyone voted. Can we try it again? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, we have before us the approval of 1 decimal, 2 decimal, parent 1, end of parent. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we need a motion on 1 decimal 2 decimal D decimal 2. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? We discussed this one. Any further discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? I need a motion on 1 decimal 2 decimal D parent 3, end of parent. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, motion passes. Now, I call on Regent Bartel to give us the report of the Physical Planning and Funding Committee.
Thank you, Regent President Welch. The committee convened right here in this room yesterday with all regents invited for a brief presentation and discussion on the State Building Commission's 2007-2009 capital budget by Assistant Vice President David Miller. The presentation highlighted what is included in the capital budget from the Regents' request and the next step for final approval. Vice President Miller also has advised us, although I don't think he mentioned it yesterday in this presentation, that the state capital budget also contains a fund of $50 million program revenue supported borrowing to be shared by all state agencies to complete energy saving projects. The savings generated is to be used to pay the debt service on the bonds, and the UW system looks forward to implementing many energy-saving projects through this program. After that presentation, the committee reconvened at its regular meeting without our esteemed Chairman Salas in a very lovely room down the hall, which had at a minimum 6 large windows and a parquet floor. And we want that to be recorded in the minutes so that he knows we took a picture and we're going to send it to him. We began that meeting with a presentation by UW-Oshkosh on enhancing existing and building new facilities. This excellent presentation by Vice Chancellor Petra Roter and Steve Arndt offered committee members a comprehensive view of the impressive planning process that UW-Oshkosh has undertaken in their campus development. We went on. The minutes of the March committee meeting were approved, and the following resolutions then were unanimously approved by the Physical Planning and Funding Committee and are presented as consent agenda items. I should mention that we will also have a separate motion for one of the resolutions on which the committee requested additional information at the meeting and has since obtained that information. So here's the consent agenda items. Resolution 13C, proposed by UW-Madison, requests authority to construct 2 utility structures for the East Campus Utility Project. These so-called underground bridges will allow construction of a utility tunnel under University Avenue and Johnson Street to occur with a minimum disruption of traffic on those 2 important east-west thoroughfares in Madison. The cost of this project, which I think is to begin this summer, is $1.5 million. Resolution 13E, which is a request from UW-Milwaukee, is to sell a small parcel of land of about 2/10 of an acre to the Milwaukee Jewish Federation for $219,000, less transaction costs. The university will lose 18 parking spaces, but the Federation will construct a new Hillel facility for UWM students and design and construct a reconfigured parking area and driveway as a gift in kind to the university. Resolution 13F is brought by UW-Platteville, requesting authority to purchase a very small parcel of land which, together with 3 other parcels that we already own, aggregating about half a city block, will be used for parking expansion. The cost of that purchase is $157,000, a little more than that, of which $35,000 will consist of gift funds. Resolution 13G is a request by UW River Falls asking for authority to accept a gift in kind of a 0.3 acre parcel of land for the Man Valley Farm. And Resolution 1.3H, submitted by system staff, requests authority for 3 all-agency maintenance and repair projects, which will occur at UW-Eau Claire, UW-Madison, and UW-Parkside, totaling approximately $5 million. These 6 resolutions were passed unanimously by the committee, and I now move adoption of resolutions 13C, E, F, G, and H.
Is there a second? We have a second. Is there a request to move any item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes.
Okay, Resolution 13D is a request from UW-Madison to accept a gift in kind of a parcel of land for the Kegonsa Research Campus. And this gift includes a 1-acre parcel with a structure currently operated as a lodging facility for researchers at the Synchrotron Radiation Center. Now, the committee had no problem with this proposal as such, but the request was held over until questions about an environmental audit were answered. We had lawyers on our committee.
How many?
After the meeting, information was provided to the committee members that the Phase 1 environmental audit indicated that a Phase 2, which is a more thorough and in-depth audit, was not warranted. And so the committee has no further questions about it, did not take formal action on it, but I will now move adoption of that Resolution 13D.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of 13D indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Assistant Vice President Miller reported that last month the Building Commission recommended approximately $779 million to complete 36 major projects on UW campuses and approximately $180 million from all fund sources in the 2007-09 capital budget. And with that, Mr. President, this concludes the report of the Physical Planning and Funding Committee.
Thank you. Call on Regent Davis.
Okay.
Yes, please. You notice I didn't call you Tim.
Before I read this resolution, I would just want to note for the record that I am appropriately dressed. And I really thought about this in advance. Yes.
Good things in the way there.
Oh, shoot. I can't remember it. Gosh. But anyway, and as you all know, I am an alum, and a distinguished one at that, of this, 2002, of this wonderful institution. So this was, it was terrific to come back home and to renew acquaintances and to be feted and treated so royally, and I think all of us felt that way. So without further ado, Chancellor, I'd like to read this resolution of thank you. So that whereas UW-Oshkosh is a demonstrated leader in providing opportunities for quality higher education and in making major contributions to economic development throughout northeastern Wisconsin, and whereas UWO is advancing a growth agenda that will meet the needs of the region by helping more working adult students earn a bachelor's degree and by adding 1,400 students in high-demand programs such as biology, microbiology, medical technology, psychology, nursing, business, and teacher education. And whereas UW-Oshkosh was a key partner in creating the Northeastern Wisconsin Education Resource Alliance, otherwise known as New Era, which allows member institutions to share resources and collaborate to meet regional needs. And whereas UWO frequently partners with New North, Inc., an 18-county consortium of business, economic development, chambers of commerce, workforce development, civic, nonprofit, and educational leaders committed to job growth, economic vitality, and a high quality of life in the region. And whereas UW-Oshkosh's total economic contribution to the state increased 16% in 3 years to $501 million in 2005-06, and whereas as the leading energy conservation and resource preservation campus in Wisconsin, UW-Oshkosh is one of only 25 institutions nationwide named a founding member of the Higher Education Steering Committee of the American Council on Renewable Energy. And whereas UW-Oshkosh works in the spirit of the Wisconsin idea to help hundreds of Fox Valley organizations grow and sustain their competitive advantage and to advance the region's economic, educational, and cultural strengths. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin System thanks UW-Oshkosh for hosting the board's April 2007 meeting and commends Chancellor Richard Wells, otherwise known as Dick, and the campus's faculty, staff, and Rick, where did I get that from? Staff and students for success in engaging people and ideas while building a regional model for collaboration and action. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I always wanted to get you to follow an order of mine, so please sit. I obviously, if it wasn't for the tremendous faculty and staff and students at this campus, there's no way we could do this sterling job in support of our outstanding Board of Regents. So I want to make sure that, I know you all know that, that this was a collaborative effort that we truly enjoyed. And contrary to Parkside, we don't want you to leave. But I do want to say one thing for the record, one housekeeping thing. You know, I'm not really serious. We do want you to leave too. No. But for the record, our presentations, we did our best to make sure all those presentations were done within 15 minutes. With the one exception, we gave a 22-minute limit to the Education Committee, and we've set a record, Provost Ernst set a record 4 deans, 4 students, and the provost gave a presentation in 22 minutes. That's pretty good. So the box lunches, I guess, are in back, right? They've been moved inside because I know you're behind and you're going to go into executive session and so on. And then those of us that don't want to be here, get on with our lives in this wonderful weekend we're facing, just guess you can grab the box lunches on the way out. But thanks again for coming to UW-Oshkosh.
Let the record show that resolution was approved by acclamation. Are there any communications, petitions, or memorials? Is there any unfinished or additional business? That said, we will have a 10-minute recess. Let's make it 5 minutes and get our boxes, and then I'll ask Regent Bradley to move to go into closed session. Are the box lunches back there? Yeah.
Box.
All right. Yeah. I'm just, you know, this flu, I've never had a flu like this. Oh, my guts hurt.
Guts?
Yeah, just to touch it.
Yeah.
And it just hurts.
Yeah.
Huh.